Chapter 316. Dustless felt weird. Jiraiya and the two toads on his shoulders cooperated so well. If he didn't look at Jiraiya's appearance, Dustless would definitely think that he was the same kind of toad. It's hard to imagine that a person and a toad can cooperate so well. Dustless stared at the incoming fire wave and shook his head speechlessly. Gomen was used by the two toads and Jiraiya. The timing must be perfect. Any physical attack is ineffective against me. His whole body was covered with a bright golden luster, and Wuchen's body lost its texture. He simply ignored the tongues that bound his feet and turned into a golden beam that went straight toward Jiraiya against the sea of fire. The monstrous sea of fire was ignored. Dustless's palm flashed with a dazzling light, and the high-density golden light condensed and compressed. A sharp long sword suddenly appeared in Dustless's hand, and it swept straight toward Jiraiya's head. Before the attack was launched, Jiraiya felt that there was a big guillotine on his head. This damn pervert. Jiraiya cursed in his heart and calmly moved aside. After several battles, he already knew Dustless's ability to move at the speed of light. The biggest flaw is that he can't turn when moving, so when Dustless's body was covered with golden light, Jiraiya took the opportunity to move sideways to avoid a head-on confrontation with Dustless. Whoosh! Kakaka! A huge golden slash shot out from the long sword, and suddenly a slender straight trench appeared on the ground, extending straight to the distant sky. The earth was divided into two, and the soil hidden deep in the ground was directly exposed to the erosion of raindrops. His reaction is quite fast. Seeing that Jiraiya dodged the chop, Dustless nodded slightly. If Jiraiya was torn by the chop, the best outcome would be his head being separated from his body. The difference between us is just that great. It's like the difference between an adult man and a baby in swaddling clothes. Just surrender and I'll give you the most humane way to die. On account of our past friendship, I'll leave your corpse intact. If you continue to resist, your corpse might not even be left behind. I'm not very good at something as delicate as controlling power. Dustless shrugged as he held the golden heaven cluster cloud sword in his hand. It's too early to sentence me to death, Uchiha Dustless. Looking at Dustless with uncertain eyes, Jiraiya suddenly felt a chill in his heart. He suddenly felt that his best friends in this life, whether it was Orochimaru or Dustless, had left him one after another. Maybe he was really wrong, his mind was in a trance for a while. Little Jiraiya, if you want to die, don't implicate me in the old man. You dare to be distracted while fighting with him, you really don't know how to write the word, death. Shima Sanin angrily rebuked Jiraiya. This kid is simply reckless. The two sides are originally from different dimensions. Now he dares to be careless and distracted in front of Dustless. It's no different from directly reincarnating and committing suicide. I'm sorry too, Sanin, I was really careless just now. Jiraiya, who recovered from his reverie, smiled bitterly, secretly scolded himself for being careless, and immediately focused on Dustless. Now is not the time to be depressed alone. Don't be timid, little Jiraiya. The enemy is very powerful, but with the help of that Sama, it's not impossible to win. Fukasaku Sanin comforted Jiraiya. It's true that Dustless is unreliable, but they also have a super powerful monster on their side, and it's an old monster who has lived for thousands of years. His small toad eyes locked on Dustless, and Fukasaku Sanin showed a relaxed expression. Looking back leisurely, more than 800 years have passed in a blink of an eye. Looking at his life, he has many children and grandchildren. Even if he dies, he has no regrets. His small eyes widened in an instant. Glaring at Dustless, Fukasaku Sanin resolutely said, "As long as the strongest evil in this world is eliminated, even if I die here, I have no fear." Shima Sanin also nodded. As long as Dustless, the great villain who affects the world peace, dies, even if she really dies here today, it's worth it. In exchange for a bright future for future generations, there's nothing to lose. Well said, I'm so moved that I'm about to cry. Squeezing out a sarcastic smile, Dustless coldly mocked, "A stinky toad dares to judge right and wrong, shameless. You have the right to give yourself justice, but what right do you have to conclude that I'm evil?" The Kusanagi sword in his hand flashed with a dazzling light, and then it slowly dissipated, lost its texture and finally disappeared. Cold light surged in the depths of his eyes, and chakra began to rage all over his body. Dustless's hands formed a seal, and in the blink of an eye the seal was completed. A blazing sea of fire erupted. Fire release. Grand fire annihilation. The torrential flames whizzed through the air, reaching a diameter of 30 to 40 meters. Even the raindrops falling from the sky were instantly evaporated as they came crashing down. Is this an S-level ninjutsu? No, it should be beyond S-level. Jiraiya's face was pale. The ordinary fire release was unexpectedly used by this guy to the level of S level. This can no longer be described with the word abnormal. At the same time, he didn't forget to take out a number of scrolls that he prepared in advance, bit his finger, and pressed them without hesitation. Bang bang bang, accompanied by several loud noises, groups of toads suddenly appeared, and their color and shape were all different. Obviously it couldn't be any genjutsu or clones. At a glance there were no less than hundreds of toads. Oh, this is interesting, the toads are mobilizing. Looking at the scene in front of him with interest, although Dustless was very interested on the surface, he was very puzzled in his heart. He stared at Jiraiya's scroll and quickly felt relieved. Summoning jutsu is actually a kind of space ninjutsu. Although he didn't know what method Jiraiya used, it is a fact that he summoned hundreds of toads. Bang bang bang, hundreds of toads in groups sprayed a huge stream of water, gathered together, condensed a majestic water source and went straight to the fire wave. It's true that more ants can be of use. His eyes narrowed slightly. Dustless secretly thought, these groups of toads use senjutsu, and the power was many times stronger than ordinary water release ninjutsu. The two opposite attributes inevitably touched together, and the void rose into the sky with blazing steam, and everything around was covered with white smoke. Toads are lining up to die. In that case, you bunch of trash can go to hell. Dustless sneered again and again, and the anger in his heart erupted like a volcano. The blazing fire wave was enough to sweep the entire sky. Being disturbed again and again, Wuchen's heart was already full of anger. His chakra began to go berserk, and the whole earth began to buzz and tremble. It was as if the end of the world was coming, showing a tendency of collapse. Mokutan, advent of the world of trees. Thick and solid dark green giant logs broke out of the ground, turning the surrounding ground into a dense forest. The thick and solid logs were as ferocious and terrifying as an evil beast. They swarmed towards the hundreds of toads and frogs in unison. Shodame-sama's secret jutsu. Mokutan. Jiraiya's face fell instantly. Mokutan is one of the strongest Kekkei Genkai, and there is no Kekkei Genkai comparable to Uchiha. Only the Uchiha family Sharingan can barely compete with it. Don't panic. That Sama is here. Fukasaku Senin's calm and powerful voice spread out along with a strong chakra fluctuation. Like a hurricane, spreading to every inch of the corner, the panicked toads calmed down. Suddenly he remembered that the Toad King who lived for thousands of years was also here, and it was the strongest existence in Mount Myaboku. Brats these days are all so strong. The vicissitudes of life spread out, and the breath of decay in it was full of endless emotions, and even time couldn't penetrate and erase it. The tyrannical sound waves seemed to contain magical power, causing countless ripples in the void. Boom boom boom, the huge toad fell from the sky, and its huge body made the earth tremble fiercely, and directly crushed the oncoming dark green wood. This group of fellows is really moving out in full force, those damn toads. Raising his eyelids, Dustless stared at the giant toad in front of him, and he could clearly feel the huge chakra in his body. There were countless disgusting pustules all over his body, and it looked extremely disgusting. What was even more unusual was that this ugly toad had a gentle smile on the corner of his mouth. It was the great toad immortal of Mount Myaboku. You can save the world, but you can also destroy the world, and the path you have chosen now is the path of destruction. The wise toad eyes stared at Dustless, and the great toad immortal said with emotion. This was his prophecy for Dustless, and it was the first time in his life that he had such a strange prophecy. Being able to create and destroy the world, this kind of ambiguous prophecy appeared for the first time. This guy has a huge natural chakra in his body. As expected of a monster who lived for thousands of years, the silence of the years has made the chakra in his body to be so huge. Dustless's face was full of surprise. The so-called chakra in the body of the great toad immortal could no longer be described as big, and it could only be described as boundless. What puzzled Dustless the most was what method this guy used to summon so many toads, and this was already beyond the scope of the spirit summoning technique. He lifted his gaze and looked at the so-called great toad immortal. He was probably related to the old monster who lived for thousands of years. I thought that since you have lived for thousands of years, you would have wisdom and would be smarter than these juniors. Now it seems that I have thought too much. A beast will always be a beast. How can you judge it by the standards of a human? Dustless mocked coldly, and he held a contemptuous attitude towards this so-called great toad immortal who lived for thousands of years. It was fine if he hid in Mount Myaboku peacefully, but he had to come out and meddle in other people's business and dig his own grave. Bastard, how dare you spout nonsense? Today I will let you experience the might of Mount Mayaboku. After being mocked by Dustless again and again, the great toad immortal could no longer keep his face. No matter what, he was still someone who lived for thousands of years, and now he was being mocked by a junior who had surpassed him. How could he not be angry? Boom, boom, boom. The great toad immortal opened his big mouth, and his big mouth that was full of mucus eventually gathered countless water streams. On the surface, it looked ordinary and there was nothing special about it, but in reality, there was a secret behind it. This guy is indeed an old monster who has lived for thousands of years. He is so proficient in celestial techniques. Frowning, Dustless's expression froze. He could clearly feel that the water streams were not ordinary. They were rapidly condensing, forming a high-density and high-pressure water stream, and there was also the presence of celestial techniques in it. Do you think I'm invisible? Do you think I'll watch you prepare a big move without doing anything? With a flash of ruthlessness in his eyes, Dustless formed a mudra with one hand, and his gaze was focused on the body of the great toad immortal. The majestic chakra that contained a huge amount of vitality began to gush out, and an indifferent voice resounded through the sky. In the sky, countless red round logs could be seen faintly falling from the sky. Celestial technique, bright god gate. The black and red round dots enlarged, and in an instant, one could see the round logs that were covered by dark clouds falling. The number was so large that it could not be estimated. Looking at it, it almost covered the entire sky. Boom, boom, boom. Suddenly dust flew everywhere and the ground began to tremble. Ka ka ka. The sound of the ground breaking spread, and the ferocious cracks swallowed the surrounding ground. Many of the toads were smashed into a bloody mess. Still want to struggle? Idiots, the technique that could even bind the 10-tailed beast, do you think it can't bind a group of clowns like you? Staring at the toads that were not smashed to death, Dustless's face was cold, and he did not hide the sneer on his face. If this group of toads could break free from such a strong sealing technique like the Bright God Gate, it would be too funny. All of you die. His pupils suddenly enlarged and the red round logs seemed to be summoned. They began to tremble slowly, like a bottomless black hole in the depths of the universe, madly swallowing the chakra in the toads' bodies. There were even some that were directly sucked until only the skeleton was left. Boom, boom, boom. At the same time, the suppressed great toad immortal unleashed a furious attack. The thick water pillar of celestial technique whizzed over, and it could easily crush dozens of mountains. The sharp water cannon pressured over, and it wanted to grind Dustless into pieces. Idiot. I've said before, physical attacks don't work on me. You didn't listen at all. Shaking his head, Dustless said helplessly. The ability of elemental transformation was too overpowered, and it could almost ignore all physical attacks. Even from the moment he ate the glint fruit, the world could not touch it anymore. His body flashed with a golden luster again, and Dustless easily dodged the incoming water cannon. At the same time, the red round logs that pressed on Great Toad Immortal's body suddenly began to absorb the chakra in his body, madly swallowing everything, including his vitality. In just a few breaths, he turned into nothingness and completely died. Jiraiya stared blankly at the tragic scene in front of him, and his mind stopped thinking. One of the three holy lands, Mount Mayaboku, was so easily destroyed. Suddenly, there was a sharp pain in his lungs and he turned his head in surprise. It was Dustless with an indifferent face, and the golden long sword penetrated his body. Chapter 317. Jiraiya's pupils were gray, and his eyes were dull, completely losing the luster that a human should have. The golden sword inserted in his chest was quickly absorbing his vitality. It's over, Jiraiya. The gap between you and me has been like this since the first time we met. Not only has the gap between us not shortened, but because you're still in the same place, you've fallen far behind me. Pucci. Dustless said indifferently. As for the two toads on his shoulder, they had been sucked dry by Dustless's bright god gate, until only their bones were left. Moreover, they were already in their prime. Just a slight touch and they would turn into ashes. Jiraiya's face became even paler and he fell to the ground helplessly. The drizzle made his face all shitty. Wu Chen glanced at him indifferently. When he was about to speak, Jiraiya's voice came first. The content of his words made him frown straight. He looked at Jiraiya with a confused expression. Naruto will inherit my will and pass on the will of fire. Jiraiya's dry mouth squirmed, and he said breathlessly, and his eyes even flashed with a boy with golden hair and a sunny smile. Boring, just a little kid who learned senjutsu and he wants to shake the world, stupid. A few months ago, White Zetsu sent news that Uzumaki Naruto suddenly disappeared, and there was no trace of him in Konoha's ninja village. According to Dustless's guess, he went to Mount Mayaboku to learn senjutsu. Dustless took back his sight from Jiraiya, and he passed by Jiraiya without the slightest pause. He didn't have much to say to a dying man. As for Jiraiya's body, it was naturally taken care of. With White Zetsu's corpse, Jiraiya's body would never rot out of thin air. Jiraiya has fallen, and now it's time to encourage Uzumaki Nagato to attack Konoha instead of paying attention to the duel between Jiraiya, Itachi, and Deidara. Dustless-sama? The ground at his feet suddenly burst open and Zetsu's figure drilled out of the ground. He looked at the flattened ground with astonishment, and couldn't help but take a deep breath. In particular, Fenghua's broken bones shocked him even more. Even the internal organs like blood have been devoured. It should be the wood style. Only the wood style has such a terrifying devouring ability. Heiju's eyes widened and he took in the scene in front of him. He hadn't expected Dustless's mastery of the wood style to be so terrifying. Originally, wood style could only devour the opponent's chakra, but Dustless's move was beautiful. Unprecedented, he directly used the opponent's entire body as nourishment. His methods were truly cruel. Black Zeus sneered in his heart. The more ruthless Dustless was, the happier he was. This was because such a person would not be able to control his emotions and devote himself to perfecting the Eye of the Moon plan. Compared to the hazy rain in the rain-hidden village, the sky on the other side was clear and cloudless. Deidara stared at the figure in front of him with a pale face. If his eyes could kill, Sasuke would have been a skeleton now. Deidara's piercing gaze turned him into a stick. Bastard, are the bastards of the Uchiha family sent by God to deal with me? Deidara's face was even more ugly. He who always cared about his image couldn't help but swear. The anger in his heart had been completely ignited. His dissatisfaction with Sasuke was far more than Dustless and Itachi. Dustless and Itachi didn't need any attribute restraint, but defeated him with overwhelming strength. But Sasuke in front of him was different. He only relied on the ability of attribute restraint to defeat him. Although Ninja's duel was not despicable, Deidara's heart couldn't help but burst into anger. Losing was really humiliating. Because of Raiki, his clay bombs were destroyed by Chidori. In front of this pair of eyes, any technique you use is ineffective. Sasuke stared at Deidara indifferently. His breath was calm. Compared to the irritable Deidara, he was much calmer. He looked down at Deidara with a victorious posture. His eyes were sharp, without the slightest emotional fluctuation. Obviously, he already regarded him as a dying prey. What an arrogant look. Compared to Itachi and Dustless, you are much more arrogant. The anger in his heart was restrained. Deidara calmed down in an instant and said to Sasuke with a calm tone. The calm tone seemed to accept his fate. Seeing this, Sasuke's brows tightened, and he was secretly on guard. Now Deidara gave him a particularly dangerous feeling. Under the calm look, there was a madness that he had never seen before. Tell me about Itachi and I will let you go. With a sigh of relief, Sasuke decided to let Deidara go once. The people of the Akatsuki organization were complete lunatics. He had no grievances with Deidara in front of him, and he didn't want to kill him. Hearing this, Deidara just stared at Sasuke expressionlessly. Chakra's fluctuations calmed down, and the murderous aura stopped. It seemed that he was going to accept Sasuke's conditions. Since then, I have hated this tone very much. It's just like those two unsightly guys. As expected of the three brothers, Deidara's eyes fell into emptiness. He began to recall Dustless and Itachi in the past. He clenched his fists and his tone was much lower. The murderous aura that had been silent broke out again. The surrounding temperature suddenly dropped to the freezing point, and a murderous atmosphere filled the air. Under Sasuke's surprised gaze, Deidara suddenly tore his coat, revealing a ferocious mouth on his chest. You, Itachi and Dustless all have the same tone. You always have the tone of eating others. This ridiculous arrogance, did you inherit it along with your Kekkei Genkai Sharingan? Especially your eyes that look down on my art. It makes me even more uncomfortable. This technique was originally prepared for Dustless and Itachi. Now I can only use it on you. Kacha? After that, Deidara connected the thin line from the gap in his chest, revealing a ferocious big mouth, and at the same time, stuffed a large amount of explosive clay into it. In just a moment, Deidara's body was eroded by the black lines. In the blink of an eye, it spread to the whole body, slowly shrinking until it finally turned into a black chakra ball floating in the air. That idiot chose to self-destruct. Zetsu, who was watching in the dark, couldn't help but admire Dustless. because Dustless said in advance that Deidara might directly self-destruct to end himself. Zetsu didn't believe it at first, but now Deidara really intends to do so. It seems to be true. That is indeed the ultimate art in Deidara's mouth. Black Zetsu secretly murmured, thinking of the terrifying range of self-destruction, and said in horror, Deidara, that crazy madman, seems to want to kill Hoodlum together. Let's withdraw quickly, or we will be affected by the self-destruction. Half of Black Zetsu's face, which was as black as ink, became even darker. For a while he was horrified. The terrifying explosion range reached a shocking 10 kilometers. No one could ignore his existence. But Sasuke, that kid, is definitely finished. To be honest, I don't really like him. That arrogant expression makes me want to beat him up. White Zu laughed without any conscience. His tone was filled with schadenfreude. Humph, the people of Uchiha clan are not so fragile. I don't know if others will kill us. If we don't leave, we will definitely be buried with this land. With a snort, Black Zetsu was quite dissatisfied. Sasuke was Indra's reincarnation. He was not so fragile. Although he was also curious about whether Sasuke would be killed, compared with his own life, even the King of Heaven was not worth mentioning. Black Zetsu cherished his life more than anyone else. He also had a meticulous plan, the Eye of the Moon plan. How could he die peacefully before it was successfully implemented? Missed a good show. With a faint sigh, White Zetsu also went into the ground to avoid the explosion. As Black Zetsu said, compared with his own life, nothing was worth exchanging. After a while, the small black sphere obviously reached the limit of what it could bear. The surface of the sphere swept a dazzling white light. After the small sphere was replaced by the white light, it began to tremble and expand without limit. Boom, boom, boom. The harsh roar resounded through the sky, and the whole earth trembled fiercely as if a magnitude 10 earthquake occurred. The surface was easily torn apart like paper. Looking up, they saw the silver-white light covering the sky. In an instant, it covered the range of tens of kilometers. It was no different from the end of the world. Any matter touched by the white impact was swallowed and annihilated in the blink of an eye. Looking down from the sky, a huge crater suddenly appeared on the previously intact surface of the earth. That kid is really smart, using Manda's life in exchange for his own life. Dustless, who was quietly peeking at the situation, muttered something and nodded slightly. While fighting, Sasuke used Sharingan to control Orochimaru's psychic beast, Manda, and used reverse summoning technique to ensure that he was spared. Dustless Sama's next plan is. Zetsu's body appeared beside Dustless and asked cautiously. Deidara had already died. The next target was undoubtedly one of Dustless and Itachi. It's just two kids fighting. Let Sasuke and Itachi kill each other. After Itachi dies, I will tell Sasuke the truth about Itachi. There is no need to participate. Chapter 318. It was impossible for Itachi to kill Sasuke, but Sasuke hated Itachi so much that he couldn't wait to get rid of him. Therefore, the duel between Itachi and Sasuke was doomed from the beginning. In short, one was willing to be beaten and the other was willing to be beaten. Both of them were willing to fight each other. Moreover, Dustless thought that there was nothing wrong with killing one of them. Compared to the scheming Itachi, Sasuke was much easier to fool. Dustless hummed a song all the way back to his home in the Rain Village. He jumped and jumped along the way. It was not difficult to see that he was particularly happy with the death of his brother. It seemed that he had seen the bitter look of the future Sasuke after he knew the truth. Dustless raised a comfortable smile. The so-called brotherly feelings had no market for Dustless. After all, Sasuke was still crying and chasing after him a while ago. Walking home leisurely, Dustless was about to comfort Uluo when an uninvited guest immediately blocked the door and stared at the smiling Dustless. If I didn't guess wrong, Itachi and his brother Sasuke, who are also your two brothers, are about to start a life and death duel. You still have the mood to smile. A beautiful woman came into view. Her beautiful eyes blinked. Every frown and smile was particularly enchanting. Her watery eyes were like gems. The person who spoke was Conan. Brother? Dustless glanced at Conan contemptuously and said indifferently, if people don't offend me, I won't offend them. If people offend me, I will pay them back 100 times. I didn't send them to heaven in advance, but let them live for so many years. I feel like a living bodhisattva, Conan. Everyone had their own standards, and Dustless was no exception. Sasuke and Itachi had wanted to kill Dustless time and time again. Now that the two of them had survived until today, it was already a great gift for them. That's true. Conan was speechless. Indeed, as Dustless said, Itachi and Sasuke had both exposed their murderous intent to him. Even if Dustless killed them on the spot, it was reasonable. After all, no one would let the enemy grow. To a certain extent, the fact that they were still alive today was indeed Dustless. Even if Dustless treats Itachi and Sasuke as brothers, these two brothers may not be able to be compared to Dustless, especially Sasuke, who is aiming to kill Dustless. Cut the crap. You're not a good person. Tell me, what kind of bad luck do you have that you're looking for me to fill in your hole? Wuxian rolled his eyes at Xuanhuan snappily and looked straight at her. Wuxian asked bluntly. This little girl definitely didn't have any good intentions looking for him. Hearing this, Conan's pretty face was slightly red, and she couldn't help but feel embarrassed. She did have something to ask Dustless for help, and this help was very difficult. She wasn't sure if Dustless would agree. I hope you can go to Konoha with Pain to capture Kyuubi. You know Nagato's body. I'm a little worried about him. Facing the strongest bijou in the legend, even if he has Rinnegan, I'm afraid he may not be its opponent. Conan gritted her teeth and expressed her inner worries. Nagato's body was overwhelmed. It's not an exaggeration to say that he won't be able to live for a few years. Now he has to fight with the strongest bijou, Kyuubi. Only God knows the outcome. Fighting with Kyuubi means that he has to use Rinnegan's eye power. He even has to use some super powerful forbidden technique to subdue Kyuubi. It also means that Nagato has to use his vitality to fight Kyuubi. No one can afford to waste his vitality. How about it? I can meet any conditions you have. As long as you cooperate with Nagato to capture Kyuubi, I can agree to any conditions. After that, Conan looked at Dustless with hope. Her eyes were full of hope. Her low voice even had a little bit of pleading, and there was a faint crystal light gathering in the depths of her eyes. It seems that as long as Dustless refuses, the beautiful woman in front of him will cry. You are full of affection. The corner of his mouth raised a gentle smile. Dustless knew that Conan was sincere, and there was no trace of falsehood. However, this little girl often deliberately found various reasons to trap him. He couldn't just promise her. Are you sure you can meet any conditions? Dustless stared at Conan's delicate body with a smile. He was afraid that Conan didn't know what he meant. The smile on his face deliberately disappeared, and his palms rubbed each other. His eyes moved up and down, and his face was full of wretchedness, and he giggled. You luo that tigress, I don't need to tell you. You should know that I'm lacking a considerate maid, the kind of maid. Then Wu Chen's eyes emitted a wolf-like light. His invasive gaze instantly stripped Xuanhuan naked. His meaning was self-evident. You are shameless. Clenching her silver teeth, Conan's pretty face was pale. Although she had some feelings for Dustless, she was not straightforward to this extent. Especially at the moment when Dustless looked like this, her feelings for him fell to negative. I promise. It's just a joke, don't worry about it. After pondering for a while, Conan was about to agree to Dustless's conditions, but Dustless's calm voice suddenly sounded. The previous wretched smile quickly disappeared, and his face was full of indifference. It was the complete opposite of how he was before. Are you kidding me? Conan, who came back to her senses, glared at Dustless. Her delicate fists were tightly clenched and white sweat seeped out. She looked like she was about to cry. Glancing at Conan, Dustless ignored her ferocious look and whispered, You should know that Nagato has stepped into the end of his life. Most of his body's organs have stopped and he is completely holding on, Dustless said. The reason why Nagato was like this was because of the previous use of the Gedo Mazo. Whether it was his soul or the organs of his body were almost collapsed. After forcibly capturing the Kyuubi, it may not be long before he dies. Chapter 319. Dustless wasn't lying. Uzumaki was indeed a descendant of the Six Paths, but the burden of using the Rinnegan was still great. Just like Uzumaki Nagato, the burden of using the Rinnegan was huge. Because the Rinnegan didn't belong to him, it consumed several times more energy than Madara. In addition, there were many techniques in the Rinnegan that he couldn't use at all, and he didn't even understand them. I know this, but Yahiko's death was too big a blow to him, and it made him stubborn and persistent in some aspects. Of course, the main reason for all of this is because of me. Letting out a desolate sigh, Conan laughed bitterly at herself. If she hadn't been caught by Hanzo the salamander, none of this would have happened, and Yahiko wouldn't have died. In the end, it's all because of Conan. Dustless didn't agree with Conan's words. Perhaps all the fault lies with Conan. As the saying goes, the dead should be buried in the ground for peace. After the incident, Uzumaki Nagato turned Yahiko into a puppet, showing that his heart was sharply distorted. His previous worldview collapsed in an instant, and his temperament changed greatly. When is Nagato going to do it? Konoha's ninjas aren't easy to deal with. Recalling Konoha's top combat power, Dustless looked serious. Nagato going to catch Uzumaki Naruto alone is not impossible, but it's a dead end. Due to Dustless's pressure, the Kyuubi and Uzumaki Naruto have buried the hatchet. Even if he didn't want to, the Kyuubi still lent chakra to Naruto for him to use. Moreover, that kid has now learned powerful senjutsu. Nagato can't be his opponent. Therefore it's not Nagato catching the Kyuubi, but Naruto catching him instead. Uzumaki Naruto in the Kyuubi mode with senjutsu is absolutely enough to crush Uzumaki Nagato. Rather than saying that Nagato is going to catch the Bijou, it's more straightforward to say that he's going to die. We'll do it in 3 days. Conan's pretty face showed a decisive look, and she didn't talk nonsense. At present, the only one she can trust is Dustless, even if he's unreliable. Moreover, Conan has a good feeling for Dustless and she doesn't hate him. But then again, suddenly realizing that something was wrong, Dustless secretly frowned, and a hint of doubt inevitably arose in his heart. Dustless asked Xuanhuan calmly, "The members of the organization have recently died in succession, and they seem to be looking for new members. Why do they suddenly want to catch tailed beasts?" His brows tightly knitted together, Dustless's thoughts, but this time it's strange. A few days ago, Pain repeatedly ordered new members news and Sasuke's new members, but today's is to catch us. It is new. Uzumaki Nagato should know his own body better than anyone else. Fighting the Kyuubi would only make his body collapse faster. There was no reason to sacrifice his life for the Bijou. There must be something fishy going on. This has nothing to do with you. Do your job well. It seems that they are talking about something taboo. Conan's face suddenly froze, and coldness surged between her eyebrows, and she shouted at Dustless coldly. Obviously, Conan didn't want Dustless to be involved in this matter. "You have a sharp tongue but a soft heart, Conan." There was a touch of warmth in his heart, but Wu Qin pretended not to know anything. At the same time his thoughts became more active. Collecting the Bijou is nothing more than to resurrect the Jubi, and therefore whoever benefits the most will be the most suspicious. Nagato's plan is to temporarily replenish the strength of the Akatsuki, but the current idea is obviously the opposite, and he can't wait to resurrect the Jubi. His eyes narrowed. Dustless's first suspect is naturally Black Zetsu. This old guy knows everything. If anyone wants to resurrect the Jubi, it's undoubtedly Black Zetsu. After all, his mother is Kagaya. On second thought, Dustless shook his head in denial. Heiju was a meticulous person. He could see hundreds of steps ahead. It was impossible for him to have the eye of the moon, to implement any new plans. As a result, there would only be flaws and expose him as the behind-the-scenes instigator. Abandoning Black Zetsu doesn't count. There is only one person who wants to resurrect the Jubi, and this person is also very suspicious. Damn Uchiha Obito, there is a limit to what you can do. You are so unscrupulous. Do you even put me in your eyes? In addition to Black Zetsu, only Obito hopes to use the power of the Jubi to release infinite Tsukuyami to the world, so that he can reunite with his former first love in the world of Noara Rin's Genjutsu. Don't think too much. Just as Dustless's imagination was running wild, a dissatisfied voice exploded in his ears. He looked up and saw Conan frowning. Seeing Dustless come back to his senses, she relaxed. Dustless looked at Conan and then shook his head to indicate that he was fine. "You are just a pawn, but your ambition is not small, but you don't seem to know the meaning of a man who is never content. How can a pawn like you touch the Jubi?" Wu Qin sneered in disdain as a mocking look appeared in the depths of his eyes. Dust still clearly remembers that after the resurrection of the Jubi, Madara and Obito had an opinion analysis. Obito wanted to become a Jinchuriki and release the infinite Tsukuyami, the strongest Genjutsu in the world. His purpose was extremely simple. He wanted to meet Noara Rin in the world of Genjutsu. Your ambition is not small, but it's a pity that your teeth are too fragile. You don't have the strength to bite the Jubi. The contemptuous smile disappeared in a flash, and Dustless recovered his calm demeanor. Among Madara, Obito, and Dustless, Obito was the most powerless, but he was the most ambitious one. Naturally, Obito was the first target to be killed by Dustless and Madara. Chapter 320. 3 days later, the spring was long and everything was recovering, showing signs of prosperity. Dustless also quickly let go of Obito's matter and didn't take it to heart. In short, Obito was originally a clown-like existence, but one of the chess pieces that Madara used to contain himself, and people who can be defeated by the mouth of Madara have always been the object of Dustless's contempt. Even if Obito has the essence of being a hero, Dustless still has a contemptuous attitude towards him. Compared to a peerless powerhouse like Madara, Obito is just a grain of sand on the edge of the waves, not worth mentioning. On the top of the mountain, black shadows were reflected on the ground. Looking up, he saw 3 black figures standing here, overlooking the void in the distance with different expressions. It's worthy of being the most fertile village in the continent. Even if there is no human habitation, it's still a rare fertile land. Looking at the picturesque Xanadu below, Wu Qin sighed with emotion. Compared to the country of rain, the land in front of him was simply heaven on earth, a Xanadu where immortals were free and unfettered. No wonder other ninja villages are jealous of Konoha. Once upon a time, the land here didn't belong to the land of fire. Pain's eyes looked indifferently at the void in the distance. His purple pupils always maintained indifference, and his body floated with cold air, giving a creepy feeling. The fertile land of the land of fire today was only snatched by Hashirama and Madara in the past. Indeed. Dustless nodded in agreement. The land in front of him was also plundered, and the initiators were Hashirama and Madara. These two are absolutely invincible when they join forces. After all, there was no ninja village in the era they lived in. Madara and Hashirama just relied on their powerful strength to draw the land into a village. The strong flower of Konoha is about to wither, and the light of God will quickly catch the Kyuubi. Pain seemed to think of something, and the words on the tip of his tongue stopped abruptly. Only then did he realize that Dustless was also present. Calling himself a god in front of someone stronger than himself, this joke is not funny at all. Leave that nine-tailed brat to me. Remembering Nagato's dying body and Conan's request, Dustless said seriously. Naruto's misfortune was also a blessing in disguise. Because the Akatsuki was unscrupulous in capturing Bijou, Kyuubi was also thinking for his own sake. Now that he learned Mount Myaboku's Sage Mode, his strength skyrocketed. The current Uzumaki Nagato was no match for him. I'll take care of Ninetails. A ripple appeared in Samsara's eyes. Pain said indifferently. His voice was very soft, but there was no room for doubt. Dustless frowned, displeasure flashing in his eyes. Naruto Uzumaki was no longer the kid who didn't understand the world. His strength improved by leaps and bounds. However, Nagato was still the Nagato of the past, and he was infected with a hidden disease. The outcome was obvious. That Tanuki brat has already... Just as he was about to persuade Nagato to give up the idea of facing Kyuubi alone, he suddenly felt cold in his palm. He was grabbed by a soft little hand. Turning his head, he saw Conan. Her eyes flashed with a different color, indicating Dustless not to say more. Seeing this, Dustless's frowning brows loosened, and he no longer dissuaded Nagato. The organization's language disappeared. He stood silently on the top of the mountain, overlooking the peaceful village in the distance. Whoosh! Several black shadows swept out one after another, jumped off the cliff, fell into the dense forest, and galloped straight toward the village ahead. All of them were wearing black trench coats embroidered with red clouds. It was the other 5 in Pain's 6 paths. After staring at Conan for a moment, Pain's eyes flashed with a complicated look. After immediately looking at Dustless, he took a deep breath and said in a deep voice, "Dustless, take care of Conan." Whoosh. After that, without waiting for Dustless and Conan to react, Pain's body roared out like a cannonball and disappeared in a flash. When they realized that he had left, he had already disappeared. They could only vaguely see a small black dot gradually disappearing. Dustless frowned slightly and his heart was full of doubts. In a trance just now, he actually saw Pain's expression of facing death. Could it be that this guy is deliberately going to die? His eyes widened, looking directly at the small black dot that had disappeared. Dustless secretly murmured. From Pain's tone, Dustless heard an unprecedented relief. Is it an illusion, or does he really intend to die by himself? It should be impossible. His dream of peace has not been completed. There is no reason to choose to embark on a path of no return. Dustless whispered in a low voice. Nagato was the kind of person who adhered to his beliefs very much. The great cause of peace had not been completed. It was impossible for him to suddenly see through everything in the world and die. Nagato. Silently watching Pain's back, Conan's beautiful and clear eyes lost their color, and they were abnormally dim. Her eyes were faintly filled with some tears. The atmosphere suddenly became sad. Nagato may be planning to end things with Uzumaki Naruto? With a complicated sigh, Dustless said faintly. His tone was neither sad nor happy. He just hoped that Nagato would not be instigated by Naruto, and he didn't expect him to catch the Kyuubi. Uchiha Obito is still calculating. He obviously has the Kyuubi-in attribute chakra in his hands, but he still instigated Nagato to attack Konoha. His goal should be the ghetto mazo and the bijou in his hands. Recalling what had happened, Dustless secretly sneered. Obito, this kid had a good plan. He deliberately tricked Uzumaki Nagato to capture the bijou. If Nagato died, the ghetto mazo and the bijou in his hands would naturally become Obito's meal. Controlling the ghetto mazo and the 6 bijou, he was definitely an invincible existence. Dustless's dry lips suddenly curled into a mocking arc. His expression was cold. Man proposes, God disposes. Obito was the one who trapped himself in a cocoon. Chapter 321. In the serene and quiet village, there was an endless stream of people. As the village with the largest population in the 5 major countries, Konoha was always a bustling scene no matter the time. The bright afterglow of the setting sun set off Konoha, and the entire village was bathed in a golden torrent, flashing and dazzling. Sure enough, it's a rotten village. Even God thinks that you're hopeless. Pain, who easily sneaked into Konoha, faintly stared at the village covered in a golden coat, and a cold mist blew out from the corner of his mouth. In his view, this scene was mourning the passing of Konoha. God is mourning the last afterglow of Konoha. The Rinnegan rippled and an irresistible repulsive force broke out of Pain's body. Tendo Pain calmed down and chakra began to roll violently. Shinra Tensei. The strong repulsive force was like a giant rock falling into the sea, splashing monstrous ripples, and the scattered force pulled the entire Konoha into the whirlpool, and a huge pit appeared on the ground. Although the scale and power were not as powerful as Shinra Tensei, after a long time of condensing a large amount of chakra, it was still powerful, and it caused unforgettable damage to the ground. Such a large range of movement naturally attracted the attention of Konoha's ninjas, and a large number of shadows rushed to the place where chakra erupted like ants smelling syrup. I wanted to help him attract the attention of Konoha's ninjas, but it seems that I'm superfluous. Staring at Pain above Konoha, Dustless didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He originally wanted to attract the attention of Konoha's ninjas and reduce Pain's burden, but he didn't expect Nagato to be so high profile. Letting out a sigh, Dustless was about to withdraw and leave when an uninvited guest immediately arrived. Danzo, after so many years you haven't aged at all, you're still very young. Leisurely looking back, Dustless saw an old acquaintance, the leader of the Root clan, Shimura Danzo. It's worth mentioning that Shimura Danzo hasn't changed much since many years ago, and he still looked full of energy. Obviously, he was an old antique from the same era as Hokage, but his spiritual and physical strength were much more vigorous than Hokage. As expected, it's Akatsuki again. A group of damned bastards, and you? The half-naked eye stared at Dustless. His piercing gaze was enough to put people to death by 1,000 cuts. His eyes flashed with resentment and he said with hatred, that old fool Yuan Fei is really not the material to be Hokage. If it were me, your evil family would never see the next day's sun. Danzo has repeatedly advocated the destruction of the Uchiha clan, but the late Sandaime Hokage has been dragging his feet. If he had taken advantage of the fact that Dustless and Itachi were not even born, the Uchiha clan would not have ended up like this. You are right, if you were Hokage, maybe the Uchiha would have already collapsed. Dustless nodded in agreement with Danzo's cold personality. Maybe he will really eradicate the Uchiha in advance. Looking at Danzo indifferently, Dustless's tone suddenly changed as he mocked. But everything has 2 sides. If you became Hokage in advance, Konoha's ninja village might have already disappeared with the wind. Danzo is a radical, or rather he advocates war. If he became Hokage, the Shinobi World War may not be as simple as 3 times. Konoha will also be dragged into the abyss by him. Bastard, you are courting death. Danzo, who didn't like the Uchiha, heard Dustless's ridicule and became angry. His eyes were instantly swallowed by dense blood vessels, and his body began to become restless. If it weren't for the fact that he was afraid of Dustless's strength with his temper, he would have definitely killed him on the spot. There may be people in the world who can kill me, but it is definitely not you. With a raised face, Danzo didn't hide his sarcasm. Danzo's protest was boring and boring. Humph, half of the Kyubi's chakra has already been taken away by you, and now you have come back. Konoha is not a place where an evil person like you can casually come. Your darkness will dye Konoha in your own color. After saying that, Danzo stared at Dustless with murderous intent, and secretly gathered chakra in his mouth. As long as Dustless shows a flaw, he will not hesitate to deal a fatal blow. What a joke. I am an evil person, yes, but you are like a mouse hiding in the darkness. What qualifications do you have to say that? And there is no place in this world that I can't go. If I don't come, no one can stop me. With a sneer on his face, Dustless sneered and condensed a golden sword in his hand. "Repent in hell, you worm in the guise of a demon." There was a frosty expression on his face as faint ripples appeared in the air. He raised his head and saw the heavenly sword of gathering clouds in Wu Chen's hand moving effortlessly. A huge slash whizzed out. It easily cut Shimura Danzo into pieces. Weak. Dustless didn't even look at Shimura Danzo's body, he directly turned around and walked away. "Oh whoa." Suddenly, a deafening roar burst out, and the clouds and the void were directly destroyed by this destructive force. The domineering and powerful chakra turned into an endless impact, indicating its power. A golden luster enveloped the entire void. The people close to Jiraiya seemed to have a tacit understanding with the beast. Staring at the tall figure in the distance, Dustless sighed. It was extremely difficult to ignore his majestic body, and the 9 beautiful tails swayed with the wind. The whole body was completely condensed of golden chakra, and Uzumaki Naruto was clearly seen in the huge body. His small face was full of confidence and he was full of confidence. Naruto calmly stared at Pain floating in the sky, especially the black trench coat embroidered with red clouds, which outlined the painful memories in Naruto's heart. Similar to Sasuke, the demonic face suddenly appeared in Naruto's mind, and Naruto's smile suddenly froze. He seemed to see that annoying face looking at him with indifference and disdain, and his killing intent exploded. "Uchiha Dustless, I will never let you go." Chapter 322. The demonic luster enveloped Konoha, and Kyuubi was no longer as evil as before. His huge eyes stared at the shadow in the sky, and he opened his mouth and spat out a small black energy ball. Pain's mouth flashed with contempt when he saw this. He hugged the sky with both hands, and the invisible energy was repelled from his body. Shinra Tensei. Boom. Boom. The dark small Bijudama was easily bounced off, and it exploded in the sky, burning with black smoke. "You want to break through Shinra Tensei with such a fragile Bijudama? You're dreaming." Rina's eyes were filled with cold light. Pain stared at the golden body with murderous intent. This ugly fox boy dared to underestimate him. Although the previous Bijudama contained a large amount of chakra, its power was not as good as Ichibi's Bijudama. "It's not bad." Uzumaki Naruto, who was wrapped in golden light, grinned and was immediately filled with murderous intent. The dark chakra in his palm rolled and a high-density energy ball was thrown out. The rotating energy ball swallowed the hurricane, and its power was obviously much stronger than the previous Bijudama. "This kid is really blessed by God," Dustless said with jealousy in his tone, and he couldn't wait to slap himself. When they caught the Ichibi, Naruto and Kyuubi had to come together in the face of absolute strength, and they had to abandon their past grievances, which led to their perfect cooperation now. "It's better to find a chance to kill him," narrowing his eyes, Dustless secretly decided. "This kid's growth can't be estimated by common sense. There's nothing wrong with erasing such uncertainty as early as possible." While Dustless pondered, the Bijudama condensed in Uzumaki Naruto's hand approached Pain. "Shinra Tensei." Pain repeated the same trick, and the repulsive force opened a perfect 360-degree defense, and his expression was calm. Boom. The invisible repulsive force turned into a hard absolute defense, and the dark Bijudama slammed into the repulsive force, splashing a circle of ripples, and then it was successfully stopped, unable to touch Pain. Shinra Tensei is really a perfect defensive move. No matter what technique it is, it can't break through its defense. Ka. The smile at the corner of his mouth froze and his pupils dilated. Shinra Tensei's perfect defense began to crack, and a shattering sound came from it like a mirror. As he raised his head, the black Bijudama directly swallowed him whole. Boom boom boom. Following the explosion, a blazing ball of fire swept across the void. Black smoke burned more than 100 feet high. Suddenly the horizon darkened. Even the Hokage would not be spared from such an explosion. "Your companions might have been killed." A sinister voice came from behind. His eyes emitted a green light, like a poisonous snake hissing. Dustless didn't even turn his head when he heard the words. He quietly looked at the fire and said calmly, "He is a man with Rinnegan. It's not right to kill him so easily." But then again, looking back, his eyes locked on the person who spoke and whispered, "You are an outsider, yet you know Izanagi, a technique that some people in the Uchiha clan don't know. Izanagi is one of the forbidden techniques of the Uchiha clan. It can instantly turn all the disadvantages of the caster, including death, into a dream, and turn all the advantages of the attacker into reality. It is an ultimate genjutsu that can freely control the boundary between reality and dream. So many Sharingans. It seems that all the Sharingans that were not taken away after the destruction of the Uchiha clan fell into your hands. There were several scarlet three-tomo Sharingans on Danzo's arm. His arm was pale white, obviously different from the skin color of a normal person, containing a majestic vitality. Ultimate genjutsu? What a joke, so what? I, an outsider, can still control it. As if he heard the most ridiculous joke, Shimura Danzo sneered disdainfully, and his tone was filled with endless pride. As an outsider, he could control some ultimate genjutsu that even the Uchiha clan didn't know. For a certain period of time, Danzo will be immortal. A lot of nonsense, what do you want to say? A few minutes will pass in a blink of an eye, what can you do? How many times can you resurrect, how many times can I kill you? After saying that, Dustless's body flashed with a bright light and he rushed out. At the moment when he was close to Shimura Danzo, the light beam instantly condensed, and Dustless's body instantly condensed, and at the same time, the sword in his hand also came down. Puchi. Shimura Danzo's head was directly separated from his body, and it was not difficult to see from his eyes that he didn't even have time to react before he was killed on the spot. It wasn't that Danzo was too slow, but Dustless's reaction was too fast. Dust release. Detachment of the original world jutsu. A white transparent enchantment suddenly appeared and covered Dustless, and a round ball floated in front of Dustless. The enchantment was as thin as a cicada's wing, but it was extremely hard and couldn't be broken. Dustless frowned and there was a puzzled expression on his face. He leisurely looked back and saw a short old man floating in the sky. It was the Tsuchikage of the rock village, Anoki. There's no need to be so confused, the 5 major countries are secretly dealing with the Akatsuki, so naturally the Kage of each village will gather once, and they can't let you continue to be so lawless, and you are just so unlucky to walk into the trap. The Kage of the other 4 major countries are all in Konoha. Seeing Dustless's puzzlement, Anoki coldly explained, and at the same time the other 4 Kage also came into view, and they stared at Dustless with murderous intent. This is interesting. A smile appeared on his face, he didn't expect that the 5 Kage would gather in advance, and the location turned out to be Konoha. Wu Chen's gaze returned to normal. His calm voice resounded. His eyes were sharp, and his whole body was emitting an extremely overbearing sense of oppression. I have said before, in this world, there is no place that I can't come. Chapter 323. At the same time, Shimura Danzo, who was killed by Dustless on the spot, once again recovered. Boom. Oh. Boom. The dust escape that bound Dustless had obviously reached its limit. It swept up a dazzling white brilliance and immediately exploded with a bang. The scattered air waves swallowed and swept up the earth, leaving behind an unforgettable deep pit. Dust filled the sky, sand and stones flew, but there was no life in the smoke. Anoki's eyes were full of hope, he thought that he could kill Dustless, after all no one has been attacked by the dust release and still be intact. Unfortunately, Anoki was destined to be disappointed. Rude and direct old man, you haven't changed at all. A frivolous voice came from the dust, mocking Anoki. He didn't need to look to know that Dustless, who was attacked by the dust release, was safe and sound. You damned old bastard. How dare you blaspheme my grandfather? Her eyes suddenly turned and stared at Danzo's arm full of Sharingan. Tsunade's anger rose in her heart, and she clenched her fists tightly. She didn't even try to hide her killing intent. Her most respected grandfather's body was blasphemed, how could Tsunade not be angry? 5th Hokage-sama, although I sympathize with your heart, please understand your position, other trivial matters can be dealt with later. The 4th Raikage was straightforward, although he was also very disdainful of Danzo, the enemy at the moment was Dustless, not Danzo, so everything can be dealt with later. His strong body stared at Dustless, the 4th Raikage didn't hide his killing intent. It was because Dustless forcibly extracted his brother Killer Bee's bijou that Killer Bee died. This was the eternal pain of the Raikage, an irreparable pain, and he lived in the shadow of hatred almost every day and night. I naturally know this, you don't need to say more. Tsunade also chose to be indifferent. She and the Raikage were both at the same level, and there was no distinction between the two of them. If they had to talk about seniority, Tsunade was slightly older than the 4th Raikage. But now this kid was scolding her, whether in her own position or in Konoha's position. Tsunade can't be weak. Tsunade's complex expression disappeared, and she stared at Dustless with murderous intent. Anoki and Gaara also stared at Dustless with their teeth clenched. The hatred between them was as deep as the sea, and there was no room for turning back. On the contrary, Terumi May had a smile on her face as her eyes flashed with a strange luster. Mizukage-sama, now it's time for the 5 villages to fight the enemy together. Please pay attention to your position. Anoki's old face collapsed. May's smile made him particularly depressed. Now is the time to fight against the enemy together, not a marriage agency for you to choose a husband for you. Both the Reikage and the Kazekage frowned. These 2 women used to have a connection with Dustless, and only God knows whether they are reliable or not. Let's deal with this Uchiha Dustless guy first. His existence is the fundamental source of the world's turmoil. After he is eliminated, the so-called Akatsuki will also collapse. The red-haired boy Gaara said. He also had a deep hatred with Dustless. Even if it was only indirect, killing Dustless was not enough to calm the anger in his heart. Dustless, this is the last time I ask you. Taking a deep breath, Tsunade's eyes stared at Dustless, and her voice was heavy and hoarse as she asked, as long as you surrender, ignorant. Dustless glanced at Tsunade faintly and directly ignored her. The golden light surged at his fingertips and gathered into a round light ball. The dazzling light made people unable to open their eyes. Facing the 5 Kage, a large number of golden light balls swarmed out. Whoosh! The golden light balls were enough to penetrate the mountain, and countless sharp lights flashed. The only thing they could do was to defend. Even Reikage, who was a speed maniac, was choking. If he pretended to be hit, he would only be hit into a sieve. Tsunade's eyes flashed with despair and her bright eyes dimmed. It was not because of the light balls in front of her. She was not afraid of death, but because Dustless mercilessly refused her kindness. This heartless man. How could he be so ruthless? I was wrong about him. Terumi May's mouth twitched fiercely, and she cursed Dustless thousands of times. The 2 obviously had a cooperative relationship, but now Dustless obviously didn't have the slightest mercy. Even if it was an act, it was too real. Don't underestimate the power of Kage. He suddenly raised his hands and a huge sand-shaped solid rose from the ground, condensed and shrank and turned into a solid defense. It was hundreds of feet long, and separated the 5 Kage from the oncoming light balls. Bang, bang, bang. Without exception, the golden light balls all hit the sand-made defensive wall, leaving countless small round holes, but they couldn't break the wall. I haven't seen you for a few years and your strength has increased. Seeing this, Dustless grinned and blew out cold air from his mouth. With a strange look, chakra began to surge out of his body. When he was about to give the enemy a fatal blow, the ground under his feet sank deep. Crack, crack, crack. The ground under his feet strangely sank more than 10 meters deep, and the surrounding soil was sealed. There was only a passage above. Whoosh! The sound of torrential water suddenly came, and judging from the flow of the water, it was quite turbulent. Looking up, it was a turbulent wave, and it almost instantly filled the square pit, turning it into a sea. They are quite cooperative. Seeing this scene, Dustless slightly nodded, showing an interested expression. He was quite looking forward to the next action of the 5 Kage. The square pit has limited the space of movement, and a large number of water gushed in. Any creature in the pit will be affected by the resistance of the water flow, and Dustless's speed will be affected. At least the 5 Kage thought so. Chapter 324. The wide pit was filled with water in the blink of an eye. Now that light-speed bastard should be restricted, right? May looked down at Dustless, who was motionless in the sea. She frowned slightly and immediately licked her thin lips, showing a puzzled look. She was very curious about how Dustless avoided the joint attack of the 5 Kage. The situation that came into view was quite strange. All around them were water sources with rapids, and from beginning to end, they couldn't get close to Wu Chen in the slightest. With him as the center, a vacuum zone isolated everything was formed. In particular, Dustless's expression was particularly hateful, and he was looking forward to the clown's performance. May couldn't help but be angry. No matter how much you despise others, there should be a limit. Kazekage-sama. The hot-tempered Reikage couldn't hold back his temper and urged Gaara. His words revealed a monstrous killing intent, as if he couldn't wait to tear Dustless into pieces. Killer Bee fell in the hands of Dustless, and he wanted to pay with blood. No problem. With endless coldness in his eyes, Gaara didn't hesitate at all. The powerful and boundless chakra in his body began to erupt, and the dead sand around him seemed to be summoned by the wind god and rushed over from all directions. However, it didn't take long for Gaara's face to be covered with sweat. The weight of the sand was not light, and it was extremely laborious to control. Upon seeing this, Inoki suddenly stepped forward and placed his calloused hands on Gaara's back. Earth release, lightweight rock technique. Gaara, who was controlling the heavy sand, suddenly relaxed. He felt that his body was much lighter, and the weight of the sand was only 1% of the original. There was no doubt that it was Inoki's masterpiece. Gaara immediately turned his head and gave Inoki a grateful look, and immediately worked harder to control the sparkling sand. His proficiency had obviously improved a lot compared to before. This old man is finally doing something that a human should do. His rough eyes swept across Inoki's body, and the fourth Reikage disgust for Inoki eased. After all, his father, the third Reikage, died under the plot of the rock village. Seeing that Inoki wanted to repent, the dissatisfaction in the fourth Reikage's heart subsided. Take this. With Gaara's roar, all the heavy gravel swarmed into the deep pit filled with water, turning it as sticky as paste. The resistance became even greater, making it difficult to move. In this sealed space, I want to see how you can move at the speed of light. The fourth Reikage smiled ferociously. Dustless's space had been completely suppressed, and there were only a few places where he could move at the speed of light. Don't underestimate him. After all, he's a legendary figure on the same level as Uchiha Madara and Hashirama Senju. Inoki was cautious and meticulous. Although Dustless seemed to be powerless at this time, he was like a livestock in a cage waiting to be slaughtered. In the past, he had several confrontations with Dustless. He thought that he would win, but he was slapped in the face by Dustless. And it was the kind of slap that was extremely loud. I naturally know this, and it's up to me to do it. A loud voice burst out, and the Reikage's body was covered with chakra, and the harsh roar made people's scalp numb. This state is so strong. Mei and Tsunade looked at each other, and they could see the shock in each other's eyes. The Reikage was extremely powerful at this time. The surface of his strong bronze skin was covered with dark blue chakra, and the sharp thunder could be heard. The dark blue chakra was like an unbreakable shield. Sure enough, it's not simple. It's worthy of being the Reikage who is famous for his taijutsu. He can control the power of thunder and lightning, and use chakra and lightning to reach the level of physical activation. All aspects of the body's functions are significantly improved. It's not simple. Tsunade, who knew medical ninjutsu, could see that the Reikage's move was extraordinary. It stimulated the body to the limit in all aspects of physical fitness. An ordinary human body facing the violent stimulation of chakra would probably bleed to death on the spot. Under the gaze of the other four Kage, the Reikage put his arm into the deep pit of water and sand. No wonder he's the leader of the village, he really can't be underestimated. Under the deep pit, Wu Qin held his hands in front of him, and his body was covered with golden evil chakra, which was also a substantialized existence, and the golden sand that wanted to erode him was excluded. After quietly observing for a while, Dustless nodded and showed a look of appreciation. First, he used earth release to restrict my movement, then he used water release to bury me alive. At the same time, he used water to seal the entire space so I can't move at the speed of light, completely restricting my movement. Next, he used the sand that contains metal to strengthen the defense, but it seems that it's not over yet, there should be more. After carefully observing the surroundings for a moment, Dustless was cautious. These various moves were obviously the attacks of 3 of the 5 Kage, but there were still 2 Kage-level powerhouses who haven't made a move yet. Pa! Outside of the evil golden chakra, a sudden flash of silver light flashed. Dustless was slightly stunned, and the originally dark world suddenly lit up. This is thunder and lightning, so that's how it is. Looking at the bright world in front of him, Dustless's eyes flashed as if he just woke up from a dream. With the dazzling light of the thunder and lightning, he could clearly see countless golden particles floating in the mud formed by the water and sand, and looking at it, there were more than 10 million of them. The water contains all kinds of minerals and it's already conductive, and now there are countless metals in the sand, so the water droplets will form a huge lightning net. There's no place for me to hide. Although Dustless was curious about how the 5 Kage could cooperate so well, he couldn't help but sneer. Chapter 325. Feeling the violent thunder and lightning all around, ripples appeared in Kuroto's dark eyes. He did not expect the so-called 5 Kages to be so extraordinary. If they were to work together, they could actually exert a super-dimensional combat power. Ka. When Dustless was thinking about it, the golden materialized chakra that was resisting the erosion let out a sorrowful cry. There was a burst of ka similar to the sound of glass shattering, which immediately attracted Dustless's attention. Looking up, what came into view was the golden skeleton with slight cracks. It was like the ribs of a human body, tightly protecting Dustless. This unassuming skeleton was extremely strong, harder than steel. Dustless relied on this to resist the impact of the water, but now there were cracks. It was enough to prove that the change in quality after using several ninjutsu was completely estimated by multiples. It really can't be underestimated, but maybe you don't understand. Although speed is my strength, compared to this simple escape technique, absolute destruction is my specialty. Dustless whispered to himself. At the same time, high-density chakra began to erupt violently. The rich golden chakra was spotless, light and clean. It poured into the skeleton that was about to collapse and was absorbed. In just a blink of an eye, the collapsed and decomposed skeleton gathered and condensed again. It was shining with a new luster, reborn, and its strength and physique were both expanding. Its size was constantly increasing, like a hungry and thirsty baby, greedily absorbing the chakra in Dustless's body, strengthening its own body formed by chakra. Looking up, one could see an extremely huge skeleton. Its appearance and demeanor were the same as an enlarged version of a human. The golden giant's demeanor was terrifying and oppressive. The golden light from its body was like 1,000,000 degrees high temperature. In an instant, the surging sea in the deep pit evaporated into nothingness. The sand particles in the pit were directly burned into a fiery red color, and everything that could be dissolved was dissolved. What the hell is that? Why is it so evil? The faces of the villagers standing beside the deep pit were filled with fear. They looked at the giant golden head down below in shock. Through the giant body, they could easily feel the extraordinariness of that ancient aura. That spirit of daring to fight against the heavens and earth had deeply moved them. The ferocious Tengu armor challenged everyone's bottom line. That's Dustless's Kinsusanoo dodge. Suddenly recalling the accident in the Hokage's office, Tsunade warned loudly. She tensed up and stared at the towering body in horror. When she first saw Dustless's Kinsusanoo, it was just a small shape, but now it has become a behemoth. So, the huge body suddenly stomped on the ground, and the golden body jumped out of the deep pit, and the body that weighed countless tons landed on the ground. Boom, 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 the whole earth burst open like a piece of paper. The violent vibration was like a meteorite outside the universe hitting the earth, and the earth trembled fiercely. Cracks appeared on the ground within a radius of tens of miles. The 30 to 40 meters tall body went straight into the sky, with 2 slender zanpakuto on its waist. It had 2 heads and 4 arms, and its crimson eyes flickered with the afterglow of a demon. The size of Kinsusanoo could be determined according to the will of the caster, that is, big or small, and it could become any position. Everything was determined by the will of the caster. Dustless was too lazy to use the complete Kinsusanoo to deal with them. Although the 30 to 40 meters tall Kinsusanoo in front of him was still extremely terrifying, it was indeed not Dustless's complete body. What is this? What is this? Gaara choked and said numbly. It took all his strength to say these words. After he finished speaking, he was listless as if his soul had been sucked away. Sure enough, it's that kind of powerful jutsu. Inoki smiled bitterly. Kinsusanoo's height was as high as the sky, and the power of the whole body was like a war god from ancient times. Its body contained invincible power. Inoki and the second Tsuchikage had experienced the power of Kinsusanoo, and his understanding was naturally incomparable. This jutsu was completely in the realm of gods, and it could be called an invincible jutsu. I once heard my grandfather say that this is the Kinsusanoo of the Uchiha family. Dustless used it in the past, but the Kinsusanoo at that time was obviously different from the one in front of us. I thought my grandfather was talking about myths, but now it seems... Speaking of this, Tsunade clenched her teeth and was silent. If it was really as Hashirama once described, this legendary Kinsusanoo could only be dealt with by a god. Don't be scared by him, stand up, Kage. Inoki, who was floating in the sky, raised his arms and shouted, as if he was injected with chicken blood. His face was flushed and said, all jutsu have weaknesses that are unknown to people. This unprecedented lineup of 5 Kage joining forces has never appeared before. We have a chance of winning. That's reasonable. In addition to Terumi Mei's worried look, Gaara, 4th Reikage, and Tsunade all agreed with Inoki's statement. Dustless was powerful, but the 5 Kage joining forces was unprecedented. Especially the main battlefield was in Konoha's ninja village, and they completely had the advantage of location and manpower. I'm not interested in playing anymore. Anyway, this is a boring war to begin with. Shaking his head, Dustless looked at the 5 Kage expressionlessly. He was originally responsible for the task of restraining them, to create time for Pain to catch QB. Boom! In the distance there was another violent roar, and the tide of overbearing airwaves spread in all directions, swallowing all things in the world. They could clearly see a small black dot flying out. Looking closely, it was Uzumaki Nagato. Your companions don't seem to be able to do it, but Naruto is surprisingly strong. Gaara breathed a sigh of relief. After he and Naruto turned from enemies to friends, the two became close friends. Seeing the members of the Akatsuki being beaten and suppressed, he felt indescribable joy in his heart. Idiot, you will know the horror of Rinnegan soon. Chapter 326. The power of Rinnegan is unparalleled. It can easily create and destroy the world. The powerful sealing technique is the characteristic of Rinnegan. Some amazing worldly abilities are unheard of and unseen. Even if Nagato was weak, he wouldn't be easily defeated without a sound. Rinnegan wasn't just for show. Instead of worrying about others, it's better to worry about my own situation. You are still lambs waiting to be slaughtered. Dustless's cold eyes swept past the 5 Kage and he smiled coldly. The cold air from his mouth could freeze time and space, and crystal snowflakes appeared in the flowing air. Kinsusanu of the Uchiha family. It said that if you see him you will definitely die. Sure enough, this technique can only be dealt with by the legendary god of ninja, Hashirama Senju. The fourth Raikage's strong body trembled slightly as he said unwillingly. It's important for people to have self-knowledge. The fourth generation Raikage can recognize the gap between them. Wuchen was very surprised. He thought that this muscular man would fight with him, but he didn't expect him to be calm. It seems that he's the same kind of man as Jiraiya. I can't be careless. Seeing this, Wuchen couldn't help but sigh. None of these Kage were easy to deal with. Whether it was Inoki, Gaara, Tsunade, Terumi Mei or the fourth Raikage, they all had their own characteristics. The Raikage looked like a muscular man, but in fact he was careless. If he was really reckless, he wouldn't be able to become the commander of the ninja allied forces. The children's game time is over. Dustless's voice just fell, Kinsusanu's katana of light came out of its sheath, and the slender golden light enveloped the earth. Even if he didn't wield his sword to destroy the world, the 5 Kage were extremely uneasy. A height of tens of meters was no longer an existence that humans could deal with. Even Inoki, who had a strong will, couldn't deal with it. Is this bastard really going to kill me too? Terumi Mei's pretty face was ashen. She tried her best to remain calm. Suddenly, she remembered the covenant between her and Dustless in the past. Her pale lips raised a bitter smile. Until now, Mei hasn't received any news about Nibi's Jinchuriki. I don't think so. You wouldn't be so reckless. Shaking her head, Terumi Mei decisively denied the thought in her heart. Her eyes became firm again. Dustless and her had no conflict of interest. They even had a common purpose in some aspects. His dispirited mood was swept away. His eyes shone brightly as he stared at the golden giant that was tens of meters tall. He took this as a test of his tolerance. Under everyone's surprised gaze, Kinsusanu raised his arm high, and the katana in his hand swept in the direction of Mei and the others. So, there was a ripple in the air, and a golden light shot out like a hurricane. Looking up, they saw a huge golden light that covered the sky and went straight toward Mei and the other 5 Kage. Boom, boom, boom. The golden light along the way was like the incarnation of the law of destruction, annihilating all matter in contact with it, regardless of whether it existed or not. In the blink of an eye, they vanished into thin air. There wasn't even a trace of their existence. Their fate was too horrible to bear. As far as the eye could see, a long and narrow crack had suddenly appeared on the ground that was covered in scars. It was boundless, and it was practically impossible to see the end. It was as if an enraged god had torn it apart, and it was extremely horrifying. It's over. It's boring. Dustless sighed regretfully. His face was filled with disappointment. He originally thought that the 5 Kage could make him take them seriously for once, but he didn't expect them to be so weak. No wonder Uchiha Madara could easily kill them later. Over. Don't underestimate Shadow's power. Even if you get carried away, you should know when to stop. Suddenly, a steady and powerful roar resounded through the sky, accompanied by a strong chakra wave. The ground began to sink, especially the ground under the feet of Dustless. Kinsusanu collapsed in an instant, and he fell into a deep pit. Earth release again. This little old man is really difficult to deal with. Wu Qin, who was in the deep pit, stared at the blue sky and couldn't help but frown. He could clearly see a faintly discernible black spot at the focal point of his line of sight. It was the Tsuchikage Inoki. This time, Inoki obviously used all his strength, aiming at Dustless's direction, and the silent chakra in his body began to surge. Dust release, boundary stripping technique. A white halo shone between his hands, and as Inoki's voice fell, Kinsusanu was suddenly sealed by this transparent white barrier. Inoki, this old man is really desperate and full of energy. Looking around and seeing this tough barrier, Dustless showed a playful smile. He didn't care that Kinsusanu was eroded by the dust release, and his expression was natural and leisurely. But what's the use of this? A contemptuous smile appeared on the corner of his mouth, and his scarlet eyes shot out evil eye power. The power in his eyes began to rage, and the boundless eye power seemed to be able to distort time and space, and the space rippled faintly. The dust release tailor-made for Kinsusanu began to show small white cracks. How is this possible? Floating in the sky, Inoki, who was gasping for breath, widened his eyes and fixed his eyes on the transparent dust release. In the dark, he seemed to hear a cracking sound. Are you kidding me? Is he going to grow bigger? Even with Inoki's calmness, he was shocked. As the saying goes, there is a limit to everything. The golden giant in front of him didn't even have a limit. As long as there was enough chakra, it seemed that he could grow without limit. Bang bang bang. Sure enough, with the help of Dustless's chakra, Kinsusanu's body grew bigger again, and the indestructible dust release collapsed instantly, like a broken mirror. It was extremely fragile. Boom boom boom. With another slash, the deep pit that Kinsusanu was suddenly torn apart, and the dust in the sky scattered like raindrops. The great body was inevitably exposed to the air. Gulp. A choking sound was heard, and the 5 Kages, including Inoki, looked at the huge golden giant in astonishment. Looking at the big scarlet eyes, there was a fear that came from the depths of their souls. It went against the norm to grow taller by dozens of meters. It seems that Bao made the right bet. Mei smiled with joy. Fortunately, she was able to reach an agreement with Dustless in advance. In this way, the safety of the Mist Village was guaranteed. Otherwise, Mei's face would be the same as the other 4 Kages, and her face would also be ashen. This abnormal power is comparable to Uchiha Madara. Inoki's face was heavy, and his hunched back seemed to be carrying a boulder of thousands of pounds, making him breathless. Throughout the world, Inoki was the only one who experienced the horror of Uchiha Madara. But it's not impossible. Inoki's eyes flashed, and in his heart, he put Dustless on the same level as Uchiha Madara. As long as they gather all the power of the 5 major countries, defeating Dustless shouldn't be difficult. When the number reaches a certain level, it can change the whole world. Everyone, the current situation is urgent. The 5 major countries should form a ninja allied forces and jointly suppress the enemy. Inoki's body fell to the ground, and he suggested to the other 4 Kages. Since the quality was not good, they could only rely on the number of people to exhaust the enemy. The enemy that Inoki mentioned was naturally Dustless and the Akatsuki. The Sand Village has no opinion, and I think the daimyo should not be willing to be someone else's puppet. He will agree to this alliance. So, I agree to form a ninja allied forces immediately. Gaara agreed without hesitation. Those high and mighty big names did not want to become puppet-like existences. They had to sit on their bottomless seats and live freely. Gaara was 100% sure that the daimyo would agree with this proposal, unless they wanted to live like puppets in the future. Otherwise they would definitely live. I also agree Killer Bee's death must be paid with blood. Yandame Reikage gnashed his teeth and said hatefully. His hatred towards the Akatsuki organization, or rather towards Wu Qin, had reached an unprecedented level. Terumi, Mei and Tsunade looked at each other and nodded in agreement. Everyone. War is the biggest obstacle to peace. Chapter 327. The ninjas of the 5 major countries are disgusted with the Akatsuki. If it wasn't for the emergence of this mysterious organization, the balance between the 5 major countries wouldn't be broken. One day the 5 major countries are closely related to each other, and when the balance is broken, it means war. Therefore, even if there are many contradictions, there won't be a violent conflict because once it happens, it means war. War is not a game and there is no absolute winner. It's funny. As if he heard the most ridiculous joke in the world, Inoki's face was full of disdain, showing a contemptuous smile, and sarcastically said, "A dark organization composed entirely of S-class ninjas is talking about peace." Not only Inoki's face was full of sneer, but the other Kage also showed a strange look. First of all, let me introduce myself. Ignoring the disdainful look of the Kage, the masked man said something amazing. My name is Uchiha Madara. As the words fell, the masked man's mask began to twist, and the dark pupil turned into a deep three-tomo. The evil eye power was extremely powerful, and with just a casual glance, you will be addicted to it and can't extricate yourself. With the huge momentum of the whole body, he indeed has the appearance of Uchiha Madara. The acting is realistic enough, but the aura is not enough. Removing the Kansusanu, Dustless gave the masked man a thumbs up. If his aura is strong enough, no one will be able to recognize that he is a copy of Uchiha Madara. However, Uchiha Madara is not a character that can be easily imitated. Obito is not as strong as Uchiha Madara. Naturally, he does not have the confidence of Uchiha Madara, so in the eyes of Dustless, he is full of flaws. Dust Release, Boundary Stripping Technique. Inoki was so angry that he directly hit the masked man with Dust Release, making him unable to move, and said with a cold smile, "Uchiha Madara? This old man once had the honor to see his face. Maybe your eye power is very strong, but you are still too far away from his spirit of treating all living beings as grass. If you want to surpass him, go home and hone yourself for 10 years. Without the slightest mercy, Inoki's old mouth was as sharp as a knife at the moment, viciously belittling the masked man. That's all I have to say. It's up to you to believe me or not. Hearing this, the masked man only responded with indifference. His heart seemed to have been frozen, without any human emotions. Boom boom boom. The white enchantment that condensed the body of Obito shattered with a bang, raising smoke and dust several feet high. The surroundings suffered the purest destruction, and the appearance was completely changed. Inoki's face was full of hope, hoping to get rid of this guy who pretended to be Uchiha Madara. To put it bluntly, the reason why Inoki was so eager to get rid of this Uchiha Madara in front of him was because he wanted to cut off the nightmare. Unfortunately, he was destined to be disappointed. A moment later, a strong chakra wave came out from the sand and dust that filled the sky. The wanton smoke was suppressed, revealing the masked man who was intact. Seeing this, the corners of Inoki's mouth twitched without leaving a trace. He was so depressed that he wanted to vomit blood. Including the masked man in front of him, there were already 2 people who had been hit by the dust release head-on. Casually glancing at Inoki, the masked man's eyes fell on Wu Qin, and a strange color flashed through his eyes. The previous fierce masked man of Kansusanu was in his eyes. Only by obtaining the eye power beyond Mangekyo Sharingan can one open the legendary complete Kansusanu. Mangekyo alone can't open the complete Kansusanu. Kakashi is a Byuji. Sasuke and Itachi's eyes are intact. This guy is... The scarlet three-tomo Sharingan flashed with confusion. After a while, he no longer entangled with it. There are too many unsolved mysteries in the world. There is no need to care about a small pawn. Continue the previous topic. His eyes fell on the 5 Kage again. The masked man's body was full of rapid oppression, coupled with his unfathomable strength. No one could ignore him. Therefore he snatched Dustless's script. The eyes of the 5 Kage were all focused on him. Pretending to be a ghost. Wu Qin curled his lips when he saw this. His face was full of disdain. Obito, this kid was really good at acting. He inverted right and wrong. It was easy for him to say that the red was white. As long as you hand over Nibi's Jinchuriki, everything will be over and there will be no war. The masked man's eyes fell on Reikage. His tone was cold, but he was very serious. Obviously he was not joking. He said solemnly, "I will bring the whole world into the world of dreams. Human souls will be sublimated." Hearing this, the 4th Reikage just sneered again and again. He ignored the previous remarks of the masked man and asked directly, "What if I don't hand over Yujito?" The surging murderous aura gathered, and Reikage's murderous aura was revealed. Handing over his companions in exchange for peace, such a crazy thing, he knew he couldn't do it. In particular, the ambitious Akatsuki organization's purpose was obviously to plot against the whole world. Even if he really handed over Nibi's Jinchuriki to the masked man, he wouldn't let the world go. Don't agree. This is very simple. The 3-tomo Sharingan reflected an evil light, and the masked man sneered, "There is only one consequence of this. That is war." As soon as he finished speaking, the atmosphere turned grave and stern for a while before it suddenly exploded. It was like a giant rock falling into the calm water, splashing huge ripples. Not only the 5 Kage were stunned by the masked man, but even Dustless was also stunned for a short time. What is Obito's idea? Now the White Zetsu army should not be completed yet. Where did this guy get the confidence to do such a thing? Dustless frowned deeply, trying to spy on the masked man, but found that at this moment, Obito was covered with a mysterious veil and he couldn't see through it. Compared with the previous Obito who could be freely played with, the masked man in front of him, Dustless also felt a sense of danger. Chapter 328. The number of the ninja allied forces wasn't something to be underestimated. They were as many as the hairs on a cow, and their combat power was extremely strong. At least, they could easily defeat 100,000 white Zetsu with tens of thousands of people. The more confident you are, the harder you fall. Inoki mocked the masked man's arrogant words and said contemptuously, "Since you want to fight, then the rock village will accompany you to the end." Inoki's murderous aura was awe-inspiring, and his tone was resolute. Unlike others, he had experienced 3 shinobi world wars, and he had already honed his will. It was unrealistic to use the word war to defeat his will. The so-called peace was won by fighting, not by begging. As the Tsuchikage-sama said, no matter who you are, no matter what kind of conspiracy you have, we will fight to the death. Even if we have to fight to the last soldier, we won't give the world to a madman like you. Taking a step forward, Mei made the final decision. Obviously, she wanted the entire Mist Village to be the first front line against the Akatsuki. Women are not inferior to men. Yandame Reikage nodded with satisfaction and said with a sincere tone. This male chauvinism made him look at Mei in a different light. Dustless was expressionless, but his heart was extremely strange. He didn't know what Reikage would do if he knew that Mei was a spy. Gaara and Tsunade both nodded. They chose to fight against the Akatsuki and there was no way out. You're quite motivated, but unfortunately you're doomed to die. The masked man had already expected such a result. He sat on the gravel casually and said, "Since the fall of Hashirama, no one in the world is my opponent. If you hand over the Nibi, I can reluctantly let you live, but unfortunately." After that, the masked man looked up to the sky and heaved a long sigh. His complicated tone was full of unworthiness, as if the 5 big countries were bound to be destroyed. His calm attitude made even Wu Qin frown, not to mention the 5 shadows. Looking at Obito, who was completely obsessed with the role of Uchiha Madara, his mouth squirmed. When he was about to speak, a light flashed in his mind, and Dustless took back the words he was about to say. As a bystander, Wu Qin carefully savored the scene in front of him. He played a different role and quietly observed the 2 groups of people with the eyes of a fisherman. Dustless. A sigh suddenly came and the tone was filled with endless decay. Dustless was slightly stunned. He looked up and happened to meet the masked man's gaze. Madara-sama. After secretly greeting the 18 generations of Obito's ancestors, Wu Qin reluctantly said respectfully. At present he still had to cooperate with Obito, this kid, to perform this play. I'll let you jump in front of the stage first. I'll end it later. Thousands of unhappiness and complaints poured into the heart. The light in Dustless's eyes disappeared in a flash. He chose to turn a blind eye. He was not a kid like Sasuke who couldn't rub sand in his eyes. There was no need to care about some trivial things. Seeing Dustless so obedient, the masked man's eyes flashed with a touch of surprise, and then he said calmly, "The value of Rinnegan can't be perfectly explained by Nagato. Now you're going to take him back?" He thought that he would have to use some special means to subdue Dustless, but the development of things was surprisingly smooth. The masked man was indeed a little surprised. However, the masked man was suspicious by nature. The smoother things were, the more doubts he had. The hostility and oppression in the 3 Tomo Sharingan were all converged and replaced with a sense of seeing through everything. His wise eyes looked at Dustless. After a while, the masked man shook his head gently. He didn't see anything for a long time. He was secretly wary of Dustless. He didn't think that pretending to be Uchiha Madara would cause Dustless to worship him. It's a small matter. With a slight smile, Dustless promised. For him, this was just a small matter of eating and drinking. He didn't say much, and with a golden luster floating all over his body, he turned into a rainbow and left the scene. Seeing this scene, the 5 Kage looked at each other and could see the astonishment and disbelief in each other's eyes. He can make Uchiha Dustless bow down to him. Is he really Uchiha Madara? Inoki's brows were tightly knitted together. He sneered at the idea that the masked man was Uchiha Madara. However, Dustless was so determined to obey the orders of the masked man, which made Inoki's heart doubtful. The strong pay attention to face. If this masked man was just a cat or a dog and he made Dustless bow his head, it was really unscientific. Is this guy really Uchiha Madara? Inoki's face was gloomy. If the masked man was really Uchiha Madara, then Dustless's obedience to his orders was understandable. His thoughts rolled, and his mind began to recall the shocking battle in the Valley of the End, not letting go of any details. I'll let you have a good time after the Jubi resurrects. I'll settle all the old and new accounts together. The corner of his mouth slightly raised, and his face evoked a sneer. Dustless thought that there was nothing wrong with Ibito jumping to the front to attract the attention of the 5 Kage. After the resurrection of the Jubi, directly taking it by force was in line with Dustless's thoughts. Uchiha Madara and Uchiha Ibito will both stand aside. Sorry Conan, I can only give the Rinnegan to Ibito for the time being. With a sigh, Dustless was also helpless. If he wanted to continue to use Ibito, it was necessary to transfer the Rinnegan to him. Some necessary techniques have an inseparable connection with the Rinnegan. Without the Rinnegan, Ibito will be greatly limited. Afterwards, recapture the Rinnegan and give it to Conan for safekeeping. After all, it was Nagato's relic. Even if the source was Uchiha Madara, now it was undoubtedly Nagato's. Dustless would naturally give Conan an explanation. Chapter 329. In the blue sky, strong wind and waves were blowing, and it was full of violent power fluctuations. The floating clouds were blown into the sky and turned into dust. Looking around, the ground was full of potholes. The potholes of different sizes were like the surface of the moon. They were scattered like stars in the night sky. In the void, the power that hasn't dissipated yet pulled the air and completely crushed it, forming a large vacuum area filled with suffocating danger. Uzumaki Naruto and Kyuubi's chakra were clearly visible. The dazzling golden luster covered a large area. Naruto, who was in Kyuubi's mouth, held his hands in front of him, looking down at the half-dead person lying in the pit in front of him, with an indifferent and confident smile on his face. Today, Naruto was no longer the kid who didn't understand the common sense of the world. He also had his own dream, Naruto's dream, which was also his motivation to become stronger. This kid's hatred for the Akatsuki is quite big, or maybe it's me. Pushing away the green leaves blocking his sight, Dustless looked at Naruto, who had entered the Kyuubi mode in the distance, and couldn't help but smile bitterly. If there's one person that Naruto hates the most, it's undoubtedly himself. Naruto's parents, his teacher Kakashi, and his relatives, including Jiraiya, were all directly or indirectly buried in Dustless's hands. It can be said that his hatred is as deep as the sea. Naturally, the Akatsuki organization that Wuchin belonged to was also taken care of by Naruto. Whoosh! Just as he was sighing with emotion, a sharp sound of something breaking through the air suddenly came from the front. A dense power of destruction, containing an energy fluctuation that was enough to destroy everything in the world, came from the front. Dustless was slightly stunned. He subconsciously raised his head and saw a huge black sphere. Rude and violent kid. Wuchin calmly stared at the Baijidama that was whizzing over. His expression was rather helpless. His words revealed a kind of headache and hopeless feeling. However, his eyes were leisurely and carefree. He definitely didn't place the Baijidama in his eyes. Sage Mode's perception was extremely powerful. Dustless wasn't far from Naruto, only a few dozen feet away. He didn't hide his aura, so it was reasonable for him to detect Dustless's existence. But, how can this kind of pure physical attack work on me? You're not the same type of person as me. With a hint of mockery in his eyes, Dustless's body lost its texture and turned into a mass of light. Naruto's painstakingly condensed Bijidama missed its target. It rolled over Dustless's body but couldn't touch him. Boom! An unprecedented explosion sounded out from the ground behind him, and a white light that overflowed into the sky swept up. The area that was enveloped by the white light was in a mess, and everything was torn apart. A huge crater with a diameter of several kilometers appeared on the ground. It's my turn now. Dustless's indifferent face was replaced by a grim expression. He raised his right arm gently and opened his palm. His right eye also turned blue, and a trace of coldness flashed through his eye sockets. Boom! A strong repulsive force surged out of his raised palm. It was like a transparent meteor streaking across the sky, causing ripples to appear in the boundless void. Boom! The heavy air cannon hit Kyuubi's face head-on, and the powerful force directly knocked him into the air and slammed on the ground, creating a long and narrow gully. Tensigen is different from Rinnegan. The repulsive force can be released and it's not centered on the user. Rinnegan's Shinra Tensei is centered on the user, but Tensigen's repulsive force can be released out of thin air, just like this attack, unpredictable and impossible to defend against. This guy really has a lot of abilities. Chakra condensed Kyubi couldn't help but be speechless. Every time he fought with Dustless he would use a new way to attack and it was all unheard of. Be careful, he also knows Shodai-sama's Mokutan. Naruto's face flashed with caution. To some extent, the existence of Mokutan ninjutsu was specially arranged to deal with Bijou. Here it comes, Naruto. Kyubi suddenly roared, his huge head looked at the sky, and he could clearly see countless cylindrical mahogany pouring down, and the number was dense like a rainstorm. Whoosh! Whoosh! Without even thinking, Nine Tails opened her mouth and revealed her dense fangs. Several small black balls shot out like bullets towards the round divine wood that was falling from the sky. The small Bijudama was much more powerful, and it contained the power of nature. Obviously, Uzumaki Naruto added seasoning to achieve the effect of a fatal blow. Boom! The falling mahogany was directly hit by the Bijudama, and it burst open, and a blazing fire wave burned in the air, swallowing the mahogany into smoke. Idiot, the bright god gate is just a bait. With a sneer in his eyes, Dustless suddenly printed with one hand, and the calm chakra began to rampage, and a huge vitality overflowed from his body. Deep in the ground, countless dark green mahogany began to tumble, rolling under the ground like snakes, rushing toward the ground. Kyubi and Naruto's feet kept jumping, as if something was about to break out of the ground. Kyubi's eyes flashed with instinctive fear. It seems that it's Mokutan. What kind of monster is this guy? He has Sharingan beyond Mangekyo and he also has Mokutan that Bijou are most afraid of. Even no Senjutsu. Kyubi's eyes were as big as a brass ring and he cursed. He used his strength to the limit, and calmly escaped from the turbulent ground under his feet. Want to escape? The ground is the home of Mokutan, there's no place for you to step on. Mokutan, wood mahogany jutsu. Chapter 330. The ground within a radius of 100 feet trembled violently. At first it was only a slight tremor, but with Dustless's continuous release of chakra, the magnitude of the tremor became more and more extensive. Kakaka, the ground shattered and the twisted green wood condensed together and whistled toward Kyubi. The green wood at the front suddenly turned into a ferocious dragon head and swept toward Kyubi. It easily entangled the nine-tailed beast so that it could not move. Kacha, high-density chakra erupted and Kyubi's condensed chakra shone brighter. Its whole body was covered with a dazzling golden light like the sun. Its power was infinite, and it easily tore apart the Mokutan that entangled it with brute force. After all, Kyubi was the strongest among the tailed beasts. Now it was in collusion with Uzumaki Naruto. After integrating Naruto's senjutsu, its strength was greatly enhanced. Ow ow ow! An earth-shattering roar came from Kyubi's mouth, and the spreading power turned into an invisible impact. In an instant, a large number of greenwood was destroyed and crushed. Not bad. Seeing this, Dustless frowned. Kyubi's strength after integrating senjutsu could be described as earth-shattering. It vividly interpreted the essence of the word destruction. It was fine if it didn't move, but if it moved, it would cause the world to collapse. That's it. With a relieved smile, the chaotic Mokutan on the ground bloomed again. New buds grew on the dense roots, containing majestic vitality. Because Dustless kept providing chakra, it became 100-meter-long wood in just a moment. The growth speed was amazing, which was one of the reasons why Mokutan was difficult to compete with. Not only could it absorb the opponent's chakra, but as long as it had chakra, it could grow without limit. Gulp, so strong. Even if Uzumaki Naruto hated Dustless, he had to admit that Dustless's strength was beyond his imagination. It was difficult to compete with him with his own strength. Once entangled by these endless trees, even if Kyubi's chakra was infinite, it would be absorbed by these endless trees. There is a limit to how strong others are. How come that bastard doesn't even have a limit? Looking around, Naruto saw that the surrounding area had turned into a forest in the blink of an eye. Naruto's face was full of astonishment. He smacked his lips and almost bit his tongue. These Mokutan were all produced by Dustless's chakra. From this, it could be seen the amount of chakra in Dustless's body. This guy has more chakra than me? Bastard. Even Kyubi, an old guy who lived for thousands of years, was furious. He was most proud of his chakra content, but now it was obviously insufficient compared to Dustless. With his chakra content, he couldn't squander it wantonly like Dustless. Infinite chakra could deceive others, but Kyubi's heart was like a mirror. There was no absolute existence. Everything had its own limit, and he also had his own limit. Dustless gave Kyubi a feeling of infinite chakra. The majestic chakra seemed to be the source of chakra, inexhaustible. With such a large-scale mokutan, Dustless didn't even take a breath, let alone having chakra exhausted. These mokutan. With the slow passage of time, the growth of the trees didn't decrease, but continued to expand, covering a large area and dividing it into its own territory. Kill them with one blow, Kyubi? Seeing the situation wasn't good, Naruto's pupils emitted a cold light, and his anger rose as he said hatefully. Letting mokutan grow endlessly like this is asking for trouble. Chakra condensed. Kyubi nodded deeply. He was deeply aware of the danger of mokutan. In the past, he and Uchiha Madara joined forces in front of Senju Hashirama. Without any nonsense, Kyubi opened his mouth and began to gather chakra. You still have confidence. Seeing Kyubi open his mouth and begin to gather Baijidama with all his strength, Dustless's eyes flashed with a sneer. His 5 fingers suddenly closed and the boundless forest changed again. Several giant green trees more than 20 meters long rose from the ground. There were pink buds growing at the top, filled with a strong fragrance, and it was quite pungent. With a light sniff, one would feel dizzy and the whole body would begin to fall. It was not difficult to imagine how terrible these buds would be when they all bloomed. Open for me. After a while, with Dustless's shout, the buds completely bloomed, and unknown yellow smoke floated out. A breeze blew, and the unknown smoke spread to every corner of the sky. Boom. Kyubi, who was concentrating on gathering Baijidama, suddenly fell to the ground. An unprecedented feeling of powerlessness spread throughout his body, and the condensed Baijidama also burst. This flower fragrance has such an ability. Shaking his head, Kyubi tried to wake himself up. This strange flower fragrance, as long as he smelled it, he would feel weak all over his body, and his nerves would be paralyzed. Naruto, although I don't want to admit it, we can only retreat now. It's unrealistic to fight him alone. If we want to deal with him, we need more power. Releasing a majestic murderous intent, the surrounding temperature dropped to the freezing point. Kyubi calmed down and tried to keep his mind as much as possible. Dustless in the distance was indifferent and calm. From beginning to end, he didn't even move his feet. His calm appearance made Kyubi have to accept this cruel reality. The difference between them was like heaven and earth. Damn flash bastard. Naruto's scarlet cross-shaped eyes became deeper and clearer. Naruto was unwilling to give up. He could only suppress his dissatisfaction. As Kurama said, the difference between the two sides was too big. Retreat. The hesitation on his face was replaced by determination. Naruto shouted. As long as there's life, there's hope. After gathering a large number of companions, it's not too late to deal with him. Boom boom boom. Looking up, Kyubi's figure became more and more blurred and disappeared in the blink of an eye. Chapter 331. Looking at the dissipating golden body indifferently, Dustless didn't stop it. He didn't want to know Uzumaki Naruto's intention. This kind of thing should be left to the masked man. In addition, Dustless also thought that the resurrection of Jubi was a good thing. His eyes suddenly turned and fell into the pit in the distance. Dustless's body began to float and flew straight over. The scene in front of him was quite miserable. The ground was full of torn pieces of clothes, scattered on the ground like snow, and the broken limbs could be clearly seen. The scene was like purgatory on earth. Oh, that rude boy is really terrible. Will he treat me like this in the future? Looking at the broken limbs with lingering fear, Dustless's eyes were unnatural, and he couldn't help but feel cold. He was the one who killed Kakashi, Jiraiya, and Namikaze Minato, but this boy treated pain so cruelly. It could be seen that this boy hated Dustless and hated Akatsuki. I can't fall into Naruto's hands even if I die. The majestic perception spread out. Dustless perceived the range of Nagato's body. Although he said that he was worried about others, it was not difficult to hear from his frivolous tone that he didn't put Naruto in his eyes at all. He completely regarded him as a joke. Let's reassemble your bodies. Looking around, Dustless sighed. After all, Pain and the others were also implicated. Helping them to fix the bodies was the most benevolent thing he could do. In the dark cave, or rather in the cave made of tree branches, a red-haired man could be seen. Even though his figure couldn't be seen clearly, it could be vaguely seen that his body was extremely thin and small. It was as if his entire body had been sucked dry, leaving only a layer of frightening skin and bones. His eye sockets were sunken, and his purplish eyes were dilated. They were dim and lifeless. Nagato? Konan looked at Uzumaki Nagato with a complicated expression, with crystal tears in the corner of her eyes. She could feel that Nagato's vitality was rapidly fading. Her childhood friend was now leaving her son. Where should she go? Half of his body had already stepped into the gates of hell. Everyone dies eventually. Don't be sad, Xuanhuan. Seeing Conan so sad, Uzumaki Nagato's pale face showed a soft smile, and he whispered, "You still have a long way to go. Conan, you have to look to the future." Uzumaki Nagato breathed a sigh of relief. When Yahiko fell, Conan was his only friend. It seemed that he was at the end of his life. Nagato's face had a touch of redness and his spirit was full. He felt like he was reborn. "Although I don't know what's going on, I can tell how you feel about Dustless." With a wry smile, Nagato sighed, "I wanted you to monitor that guy with unknown motives. I didn't expect that kid to cheat your heart. I really don't know what kind of virtue he has. But it's good. If you stay with that guy, your safety will be guaranteed." Conan was silent. She didn't like Dustless, but the two of them had been together for many years. It was inevitable that she had subtle feelings for Dustless. It was a kind of pure dependence. For me, death is also a kind of relief. These years, every day felt like a year, living in the nightmare of Yahiko. With a sigh of relief, Nagato's face was full of relief. The pressure on his chest disappeared, and his breathing was particularly smooth. He stared at Conan and said in a deep voice, "This is your private matter. Remember that masked man who claims to be Uchiha Madara. He's definitely not a good person. He has declared war on the 5 major countries and soon the whole world will start to go crazy." The big tree made of paper trees was suddenly forced open, and a ray of dazzling sunlight shone in, followed by Dustless's whole body. There were 5 bodies floating behind him, but they were perfectly restored by Dustless. "Unfortunately, no ninjutsu can resurrect you, your soul has collapsed." After staring at Nagato for a moment, Dustless sighed. Once a person's soul collapsed and disappeared, even the Rinsei Tensei couldn't resurrect him. "You know about the Rinsei Tensei jutsu?" Hearing this, Uzumaki Nagato's eyes widened, and he looked at Dustless in surprise. He didn't mention this resurrection ninjutsu to outsiders, but now Dustless knew about it. How could he not be surprised? "This is very simple because Staring at the whirlpool Nagato, Dustless didn't need to hide anything. His left eye changed sharply, and the deep black pupil suddenly changed with circles of black lines, and a purple eye was exposed in front of Nagato and Conan. "I have the same eyes as you." The only difference was that there were 9 black magatama hanging from the black lines. Dustless's powerful voice came out of his mouth. At the same time, he deliberately cooperated with Dustless. The black magatama in his eye sockets rippled, and the berserk eye power was abnormally terrifying. It gave off an extremely evil feeling. "This is..." Looking at Dustless's right eye in horror, Uzumaki Nagato took a deep breath. It was undoubtedly the Rinnegan, but its power was far beyond his. "This is the Rinsei Sharingan." Looking at Nagato's horrified eyes, Dustless was calm, looking at his Rinnegan and faintly explained, "The limit of the Uchiha Sharingan evolution is the legendary Rinnegan. Your eyes were transplanted from someone else's. You may feel surprised, but it's undeniable that this is a fact." Chapter 332. The evolution of the Sharingan is 3 Tomo Mangekyo Eternal Mangekyo Rinnegan. However, for thousands of years, only Uchiha Madara has successfully evolved the Rinnegan. Dustless's Rinnegan Sharingan was obtained by the system, while Otsutsuki's Hagoromo was inherited, and Sasuke's was opened by the gift of the Rikudo Sennin. Step by step, the only one who got the Rinnegan Sharingan was Madara. Impossible. If the extreme evolution of the Uchiha Sharingan is Rinnegan, then Nagato, Conan immediately refuted Dustless's words, but it was as if a bone was stuck in her throat. She couldn't speak at all. If what Dustless said was true, then Nagato's life was shrouded in a huge conspiracy. He was secretly manipulated like a puppet. However, Uzumaki Nagato's face was extremely calm, as if he wasn't talking about him, expressionless. "Now, the past is no longer important to me. It's because of fate and it's because of fate. No matter who the owner of these eyes is, it doesn't matter to me." Uzumaki Nagato just smiled and there was a kind of smile on his face. "You're quite open-minded." Seeing Nagato so free and easy, Dustless couldn't help but respect him, and suddenly found that this guy suddenly had a human side. "What are you going to do with the Rinnegan?" His eyes fell on Dustless and Nagato was quite curious. According to Dustless's statement, the Rinnegan didn't belong to Dustless. It was the person who gave him the Rinnegan in the past. "The Rinnegan is like a floating cloud to me, and I'll give it to him temporarily." Of course it's only temporary. Dustless's eyes were filled with killing intent. Dustless's him was naturally the masked man Obito. The reason why he gave it to him was because of the Geto Mazo. Although it's possible to have both the blood of the Uchiha clan and the Senju clan, Obito without the Rinnegan obviously couldn't. Is there any other way to heal Nagato? Her beautiful eyes stared at Dustless with hope. Conan clenched her fists. For her, the ownership of Rinnegan was not important. The only important thing was that this most important family member would not leave her. Looking into Conan's eyes, Dustless's eyes flashed with a touch of pity, but he still shook his head and said, "Flowers bloom and wilt, the sun rises from the east, these are the laws of heaven and earth that cannot be violated. Nagato's soul has been corroded and even I can't save him." Dustless's tone was bleak and lonely. Life was short. In just a few decades, it was a pile of yellow soil. Especially Nagato, who was shrouded in Madara's nightmare all his life, was even more tragic. Looking at the past few decades, they were all puppets in the hands of others. In the blink of an eye, 3 days had passed since the last incident. On the green grass, 2 black figures stood there, no one spoke. In front of the two were 2 tombstones, on which were the names of Uzumaki Nagato and Yahiko. After a fierce battle with Uzumaki Naruto, Nagato could not resist the erosion of Rinnegan for several years and completely fell. "Are you sure you want to continue the mission with me, Conan?" Looking at Conan's calm face, Dustless whispered, "In fact, even if you give up the mission of the Akatsuki, you can leave safely. There is no need to stay in such a dark organization, and live a normal human life." Dustless said calmly. If Conan wanted to leave the Akatsuki, he would not stop her. There is no need. After glancing at Yahiko and Nagato's tombstones, Conan looked at Dustless seriously and said, "Whether it's Uchiha Madara or Uchiha Obito, anyone who uses Yahiko and Nagato, even if they are gods, I will kill them. This little girl's temper is not small. But fortunately, I was smart enough to put all the blame on Madara and Obito." Seeing Conan's look of wanting to tear Madara and Obito to pieces, Dustless felt more fortunate that he explained the truth. But then again, Conan stared at Dustless with a puzzled look and asked, "That man named Uchiha Obito, how can he compete with the ninjas of the 5 major countries? His mantissa can't play a fundamental role. The power of a bijou is enough to destroy the world, but the ninjas of the 5 major countries are even more powerful. If things go wrong, the masked man may really capsize." Because of the White Zetsu army inside the Geto Mazo, with a gloomy look, Dustless explained in a heavy tone. On the surface, the White Zetsu soldiers were trained by the Geto Mazo, but in fact, they were the incarnations of humans who fell into the infinite Tsukuyomi in ancient times. In the world, besides Black Zetsu, only Dustless knew the secret. In short, that guy will take the lead and we will take the opportunity to take advantage of the situation. Let him play with the ninjas of the 5 major countries. Wu Qin sneered. The day before yesterday, Nagato's relic, the Rinnegan, was handed over to the masked man unscathed. Even if the kid wore a mask, Wu Qin knew that his heart was blooming like a flower, like eating honey, and even at that time he used his eloquence mouth escape to fool Wu Qin. At the same time, with a pair of Rinnegan, Obito's strength will skyrocket, and it means that the Geto Mazo and the bijou will fall into his hands. "Kid, is it really okay to secretly eavesdrop on an old couple like this?" Suddenly, Dustless's words made Conan's face suddenly collapse, and when she was about to question Dustless, an indifferent young figure suddenly came into sight. Xuanhuan looked at the young man who had suddenly appeared in surprise. A trace of astonishment flashed in her eyes. Even she had not noticed any trace of this young man with an imposing appearance. Chapter 333. His slightly messy hair fluttered in the wind, and his thin body swayed in the hurricane. The young man's eyes were cold and sharp like a blade, making people not dare to look at him. The long sword on his waist added a little bit of dominance to the young man. His eyes were bright like stars, giving people the feeling that they could touch the stars above the 9th heaven. That awe-inspiring temperament was the opposite of Dustless's casual and gentle temperament. It was Uchiha Sasuke, the brother of Uchiha. Looking at Dustless with cold eyes, Sasuke stared at Dustless with scarlet eyes. His expression was gloomy, his face was pale, and his aura was faintly morbid. Under Dustless's astonished gaze, Sasuke's pupils began to rotate rapidly, and surging eye power shot out, making the air flow around all stagnate. This Sharingan is obviously not an ordinary Sharingan. It has a special pattern that has never been seen before. It seems to be the same Mangekyo as Dustless and Itachi. The Uchiha clan is really favored by God. Conan's eyebrows wrinkled and she cautiously said, "The Uchiha clan's Sharingan is mysterious and unpredictable, both offensive and defensive. The world's understanding of the Uchiha clan is one-sided, blindly thinking that it's just for show. After evolving into Mangekyo Sharingan, its invincible physical attack can even kill a god." The scene was oppressive. Sasuke's Mangekyo Sharingan stared at Dustless, and his whole body was shrouded in a looming aura. The Kusanagi sword on his waist has not yet been unsheathed, but it already shot out a sharp light that could cut everything. "Oh, my stupid brother?" The cold atmosphere was broken by this inexplicable sudden voice. Whether it was Conan or Sasuke, they both looked stagnant and the corners of their mouths twitched. They looked at Dustless with a smile on his face. He was the initiator. Sasuke's cold eyes stared at Wu Qin, and his murderous aura was exposed. The majestic murderous aura roared out and imprisoned Wu Qin like a cage. The oppressive killing intent caused people to have illusions of hesitation. If they were not careful, they would be immersed in it and unable to extricate themselves. "You're still as naive as ever. But since you've activated your Mangekyo Sharingan, does that mean you've already killed Itachi? You're even willing to kill your own brother. You're really cold-blooded and heartless." With a casual wave of his hand, the thick murderous aura that filled Dustless's body instantly disintegrated and dispersed like a fog. Although Dustless didn't know the result of the previous decisive battle between Itachi and Sasuke, he assumed that Itachi deliberately lost. Awakening the Mangekyo Sharingan means that you already know the truth about Itachi. Looking at Sasuke's eyes with a smile, Dustless said softly, "The way to open Mangekyo Sharingan is extremely extreme. One must witness the death of a loved one to open Mangekyo Sharingan." Sasuke hated Itachi so much before knowing the truth. Obviously, it was impossible for him to open his eyes. Now that he has revealed his Mangekyo Sharingan, he knows the truth about the destruction of the Uchiha clan. "It seems that you've succeeded in killing Itachi." Looking at Sasuke thoughtfully, Dustless sneered, "How does it feel to kill your beloved brother in the past? This kind of feeling can only be enjoyed by you alone in the world." Dustless's words immediately reminded Sasuke of the scene of killing Itachi a few days ago, and his face turned pale. "You really know the truth about Itachi. Bastard, why did you bastards hide it from me?" Looking at Dustless angrily, Sasuke asked hatefully. His eyes were locked on Dustless and his words revealed his killing intent. He couldn't wait to see Dustless's skin and bones. "It seems that the masked man has already told you the truth about Itachi, so he made you open Mangekyo Sharingan? He's really cunning." Frowning deeply, Dustless frowned. This can also be regarded as an invisible closer relationship between the masked man and Sasuke, killing several birds with one stone. Not only can it draw closer to Sasuke, but it can also arouse his hatred towards Dustless. From then on, the most important thing is to help Sasuke open Mangekyo Sharingan. What a conceited and arrogant guy. Do you think you are the reincarnation of a god? Ridiculous. Who do you think gave you your current achievements? Even your Mangekyo Sharingan and your current strength, are they all because of your own hard work? Looking at Sasuke contemptuously, Dustless rolled his eyes, his face was cold and ruthless. "I'm sorry to tell you, all of this was given to you by Itachi. If it weren't for him, you would still be a clown living in your brother's world. If it weren't for Itachi, you wouldn't even be a fart now." Dustless made the final decision to define this annoying third brother. He's just a shadow living in Itachi's world. Without Itachi's guidance, his achievements won't be complimented. Staring at Sasuke, Dustless sneered again and again. He didn't expect a verbal attack to defeat him. After all, this kid's perseverance is really huge. "You really have a lot of nonsense. I just want to ask you, is what the masked man said true?" Sasuke asked in a hoarse voice. In the end, his tone was completely commanding. The six-pointed star in his eyes rotated rapidly, and his sight was focused on Dustless. As long as Dustless avoided the important things or answered him perfunctorily, he will directly kill Dustless. "You're very arrogant." Lips squirming, Dustless's eyes flashed a ruthless smile, and he was about to teach this kid a lesson. Suddenly, a light flashed in his mind, and he suddenly found that he can take advantage of Sasuke. Wu Qin looked at Sasuke with torch-like eyes and replied solemnly, and at the same time, he shamelessly added himself to it. "Indeed, as you think, Itachi died in Konoha's tragedy. Just like myself, I was deceived by the guys in Konoha's ninja village." Chapter 334. Conan's clean face became unnatural, and her eyes subconsciously looked at Dustless. When she was about to speak, she was stared back by Dustless's ferocious eyes, and she closed her red lips. What does it have to do with you? Betraying Konoha seems to be your personal reason. They didn't force you to do anything dark back then. Sasuke raised his eyebrows and asked in puzzlement. He wasn't a person who could be easily fooled. Itachi had already told him about some unknown secrets, and they naturally referred to the higher-ups of Konoha. You are too naive, what you see is only the surface of things. Hearing this, Dustless's face became cold and he said righteously, I don't need to tell you about the Uchiha clan's Kekkei Genkai. The reason why they are called the most powerful clan in Konoha is because of the Sharingan. Konoha's decades of peaceful and stable development have a lot to do with the Uchiha. Dustless wasn't talking nonsense about this. Without the Uchiha clan, Konoha's prosperity might have been extinguished years ago. What are you trying to say? Sasuke's voice was low and he was on guard against Dustless. That voice full of magic made him dizzy and even lost himself. If it wasn't for several years of devilish training and strong willpower, he might have already fallen into Dustless's trap. The power of the Uchiha clan helped Konoha to achieve peace, but everything has two sides, so it made Konoha afraid. After all, the relationship between the Uchiha clan and many clans in Konoha during the Warring States period was not harmonious, and some clans were inevitably afraid of the Uchiha clan. Dustless's words were also true, and there were indeed countless clans who were afraid of the Uchiha clan, and they played many tricks. Those clans who were afraid of the Uchiha clan inevitably had other ideas, such as encouraging the higher-ups of Konoha to deal with the Uchiha clan. So to some extent, it wasn't the higher-ups of Konoha who destroyed the Uchiha clan, but the entire Konoha ninja village. Dustless's eyes narrowed slightly, and he raised a fox-like smile, giving people a feeling of extra evil and bad intentions. Don't you think it's strange why Itachi slaughtered the Uchiha clan, Sasuke? Regardless of the change in Sasuke's expression, Dustless clenched his fists and said indignantly, it was because of the Kyuubi's attack on Konoha more than 10 years ago, which caused serious losses, that led to Konoha's high-level hatred of the Uchiha clan, especially after the subsequent attack on Konoha, which completely led to the separation of the two sides. That is to say, because of the Kyuubi's two attacks, Konoha suffered heavy losses, so Konoha's higher-ups hate the Uchiha clan. So much. Sasuke was a smart person. After hearing Dustless's words, he instantly understood the cause and effect. Murderous intent flashed in his eyes. Just because the berserk Kyuubi attacked Konoha, you want to put the blame on Uchiha and forget Uchiha's decades of achievements? Sasuke, you really are a whimsical person. Hearing this, Dustless shook his head slightly and whispered, Konoha didn't like the Uchiha clan. The world knows that only the Uchiha clan's Sharingan can control the Bijou. There is no need for specific and clear evidence. This reason is the best excuse to destroy the Uchiha clan. This is the case in this world. For the strong, killing you doesn't need an excuse or reason, it depends on their own will. Konoha's fist is much bigger than the Uchiha clan, so the Uchiha clan deserve to be destroyed. Are you unwilling, Sasuke? Do you want to take revenge on Konoha? Go use your new strength to destroy Konoha, and let the light of the Uchiha clan shroud the world again. Dustless said loudly, his tone was full of endless magic, and Sasuke's bright eyes were obviously affected and dimmed. His eyes gently lifted and fell on Sasuke's face. Seeing his ferocious appearance, Dustless's mouth flashed a strange smile of a successful conspiracy. A mere fledgling wants to fight with me, you're overestimating yourself. Dustless's deep eyes seemed to be able to penetrate Sasuke's mind. Seeing that he fell into his own bewitchment, his mind was chaotic and he lost the ability to think, Dustless suddenly smiled proudly. Just when Dustless thought that Sasuke was bewitched by him and would find trouble with Konoha, a cold sneer sounded. Vulgar. How can such a terrible genjutsu control me? You think too highly of yourself. At the same time, you also underestimate me after my rebirth. Sasuke, who recovered from his trance, casually looked at Dustless, contempt flashed in his eyes and he stood up, revealing half of his face, and the scarlet hexagram emitted a cold light. Whether it's Konoha or Kyuubi, they are all the targets of Uchiha and Itachi's pain, so naturally I can't let them go. And you, Uchiha Dustless, don't use this vulgar genjutsu on me in the future, it's boring. After that, Sasuke simply turned away regardless of Konan and Dustless behind him, and walked straight forward. When did you use genjutsu on him? Konan, who recovered from her shock, walked to Dustless and asked in surprise. She couldn't help but look at the Uchiha clan's Sharingan. Just now, Dustless didn't even use Sharingan but normal human eyes. Genjutsu? Are you kidding me? I don't remember when I used genjutsu. Staring at Sasuke's collapsed figure, Dustless shrugged helplessly and said in a confused tone, maybe I was too addicted to the role of the speaker to the extent that it was fake. That kid actually had an illusion, and his mind was blank for a short time, thinking that I released genjutsu on him. Also, do you think that if I used genjutsu on this kid with his weak eyes he could resist? Chapter 335. Dustless and Sasuke's eye power are very different. If he really uses his eye power to control him, Sasuke can't resist. After all, the gap between the two sides is obvious to all. Sasuke is just a street goods Manjikyu Sharingan, and Dustless has Tensigen and Rinnegan at the same time. Their combat power is not at the same level. I was expecting him to attack Konoha, but I didn't expect him to attack Kyuubi Naruto as well. Dustless is just counting on Sasuke to attack Konoha. As for Kyuubi, he doesn't think Sasuke has the ability to defeat him. The current Uzumaki Naruto is not the same as before, and Sasuke can't compare to him at all. As the news of the masked man declaring war on the 5 major countries spread, the whole world was in an uproar, and they all scolded the masked man for being brainless and incurable. The power of the 5 major countries is unprecedented. Even if Uchiha Madara is really reincarnated, he is not 100% sure that he can face the 5 major countries and be safe and sound. Large and small countries have also begun to prepare for war, and all of them are betting on the 5 major countries. After all, the other party is not an unknown organization. In the face of the fierce 5 major countries, they are absolutely unwilling to defeat them. After the masked man declared war on the 5 Kage, both sides did not make specific moves. War is not a game, it involves all aspects, and it must take a period of time to match various materials. At the very least, the transfer of relevant personnel must be harmonious. In the dark cave, the ferocious giant was clearly visible. Its uneven body was like a ghost, and its sturdy and tall body contained a powerful force that could destroy everything. Its 9 huge eyes were even more ferocious and terrifying. Under the feet of the giant, there was a round pool of liquid. The pool was extremely wide, and it was filled with an unknown green liquid. The dense white figures could be clearly seen. At a glance, the number was definitely not less than tens of thousands. It's a white Zetsu army. These white Zetsu are enough to deal with the insects of the 5 major countries. The masked man looked down at the group of white Zetsu, and his Rinnegan flashed with satisfaction and confidence. Even if those ninjas have great skills, they will have to pay a heavy price in the face of such a large number of white Zetsu. The Akatsuki had already collapsed. Currently only Ju, Ghost Shark, Dustless and Conan were left. The rest of the members had all died in battle. The Akatsuki only existed in name. Because Dustless took the initiative to hand over the Rinnegan to the masked man, Conan also avoided death, and now the teammate is still Dustless. The masked man also confessed the identity of Uchiha Madara to Kisame. Although the latter was surprised, he reluctantly accepted the masked man's statement and was willing to continue to serve the Akatsuki. The ninjas of the 5 major countries have gathered, and their 5 Kages are holding a meeting. The content is naturally to deal with us. I'm afraid that soon they will launch an attack. Closing his eyes, Dustless's eyes flashed with a strange glint. Then he said with a calm expression, "That woman should fulfill the covenant. She should know the price of betraying me." Silently closing his eyes, Dustless secretly thought. The covenant between him and Terumi Mei was naturally to find the Nibi's Jinchuriki, and Dustless's condition was to not hurt the ninjas of the mist. Of course it's just not hurting them. Taking their chakra is not in this agreement. Unbelievable, I didn't expect that the 5 major countries would abandon their grudges and come together. Ghost Shark said to himself with a strange expression. Inoki once killed the father of the 4th Raikage, the 3rd Raikage, and the 2nd Hokage of Konoha once died in the Cloud Village. The Sand Village also had an unsolvable feud with the Rock Village and Konoha. It's not just the 5 big countries, even the other small countries are involved. Even small countries like the Snow Country and the Iron Country are involved. Conan said coldly. These unknown small countries wanted to take advantage of the situation. Their idea was too ridiculous. As long as they did something, they had to pay the price. Small countries. Hearing this, Wu Qin glanced at Xiaonan, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. Even the power of those small countries should not be underestimated. Not to mention changing the situation of the war, they could easily change the situation in a small area. Don't care about those small things, the main goal is the Nibi's Jinchuriki Yujito. After that, the whole world will be our enemy, and there's no need to be afraid of them. With contempt in his eyes, Obito said confidently. At that time, not only the ninjas of the 5 major countries, but also you will be in my bag. The masked man's eyes spread out, glancing at Conan and Ghost Shark, sneering secretly. These so-called companions will become the sad nourishment under the infinite Tsukuyomi. His purpose is very simple. After resurrecting the Jubi, he will become the new Jubi's Jinchuriki, and immediately use the majestic chakra to implement the strongest genjutsu in the world, infinite Tsukuyomi. At that time, the so-called companions will naturally fall into the eternal dream world. I will become a new god of creation, meet Rin again in the dream world and live a happy life. The masked man's eyes were full of infinite longing, as if he had already become the Jubi's Jinchuriki, obtained the power of the 6 paths and created a new dream world. Suddenly, he felt a pair of cold eyes full of ridicule secretly peeking at him. The masked man's eyes became clear and he subconsciously looked to the right. This guy. Turning around, what came into view was Wu Qin, or rather, his strange face. Dustless's lips were raised high and his eyes were narrowed or simply closed, because he couldn't see his eyeballs at all. A haze flashed in the masked man's eyes. Just now he seemed to have become a big fat sheep. Chapter 336. The masked man's eyes flashed with killing intent. This feeling made him quite uncomfortable. Whether it was an illusion or real, he wanted to kill Dustless. There was no other reason. He instinctively felt a fatal threat from Dustless. I'll let you live for a while. Once I've squeezed out all your value, I'll wipe you out completely. I'll get rid of the trash that obstructs the peace of this world forever. Retracting his gaze, the masked man pretended that he didn't see anything, but he swore in his heart that as long as he becomes the Jubi's Jinchuriki, the first target to be erased will be this Uchiha Dustless. Dustless always gives him a very strong sense of oppression, even more than Uchiha Madara. In any case, Madara has disappeared and Dustless, this new Uchiha Madara, is rapidly rising, and the masked man has realized that he was enough to threaten him. Ambitious? Unfortunately, the ideal is beautiful but the reality is cruel. Dustless was unmoved and he thought about it. No one would be willing to be reduced to a chess piece, and the resistance of the masked man was something he expected. In the dimly lit secret room, many experimental bodies could be clearly seen. Most of them were soaked in an unknown solution, and there were stitched wounds on their bodies. Most of the experimental bodies were human, their eyes were closed, and they looked pale and powerless, with fear as if they had been tortured by fear before. A man with scales and a crimson robe carefully shook the solution in his hand. Failed again. Boom. A look of disappointment flashed across the snake's eyes. Without hesitation, it smashed the test tube in its hand into pieces. Its vicious aura erupted uncontrollably. Its cold eyes spread out and examined the human soaking in the container. A fanatical look appeared on its face. I will surpass Orochimaru-sama and become the first person to transform from a snake into a dragon, and I will be completely separated from the inferior existence of humans who are bound by time. His arrogant voice was filled with endless yearning. For a creature like a dragon that only existed in myths, Kabuto's pursuit naturally reached an unprecedented level of madness and morbidity. This was his path. Everyone yearned to become a legendary immortal and roam the sky. The 5 great nations are all ready for battle. Looks like it's time for me to make my move. Just as he was about to leave, a strange figure appeared out of thin air in front of Orochimaru. It's you? Startled, the surging murderous aura calmed down. The person in front of him was dressed in black, revealing only a pitch-black face. His empty eyes were extremely strange, just white holes. This person gave off a very contradictory feeling, or rather, he could not even be considered a human. He was completely made up of black liquid, and his true form was unknown. He did not look like a human, but he could speak human language. He was very mysterious. Kabuto suppressed his dissatisfaction and asked in confusion. Now that everything was on the right track, there was no need to change anything. There is no such thing as a perfect plan. The mysterious black-robed man directly denied Kabuto's request, and after a little hesitation he said, Your alliance with Uchiha Wuchen ends here, and the person you will assist is the man who calls himself Uchiha Madara. The mysterious man's tone was cold, and the killing intent in his words seemed to be able to freeze time and space. The implication was that this chess piece of Uchiha Dustless would also reach its end. No problem. Kabuto looked at the man in the black robe with hesitation, and his eyes flashed with a strange light, and he immediately replied in a flat tone, indicating that it didn't matter who he cooperated with. Anyway, Kabuto's ultimate goal was to become a dragon, and as long as he could achieve this goal, it didn't matter who he cooperated with. Chapter 337. In the laboratory full of containers, the atmosphere was particularly oppressive. Kakaka, the sound of a mirror shattering suddenly sounded. Looking back, he saw the space behind the mysterious man crack, which was quite similar to Uchiha Obito's ability. The only strange thing was that this distorted space was as calm as water ripples. There was no so-called swallowing force, but it was like opening the door to another world, as calm as the dead water in the deep sea. Under Kabuto's surprised gaze, the man stepped in and completely disappeared, and the space healed and condensed again. What kind of sorcery is that? No wonder I couldn't sense his existence. There wasn't even chakra's fluctuation. Kabuto recovered from his shock. This kind of mysterious space ninjutsu was impossible to detect. It came and went without a trace. I can only cooperate with that masked man? Kabuto looked at the snake head that was cut off before and suddenly exerted force. The snake body that was connected to the body began to move. With a puff sound, a new snake head was spat out, and the whole body was covered in disgusting liquid. His heart was filled with deep unwillingness. Even if he was unhappy, he didn't dare to say anything, and as for fighting, he didn't have the confidence to do so. Thinking of the so-called yin-yang release from before, Kabuto looked at it with fear in his heart. Any kind of ninjutsu that can destroy anything is absolutely invincible. Humph, wait until I turn from a snake into a dragon, I will catch you as a specimen. All the resentment he suffered today turned into a strong motivation, and Kabuto vowed that one day when he surpasses the mysterious man, he will skin him alive and study him. With the implementation of the battle plan of the 5 major countries, thousands of ninjas entered the war, gathering the young battle power of all countries around the world. The first thing they did was to establish the Ninja Allied Forces, and the 4th Reikage of the Cloud Hidden Village was the commander. The allied forces of the 5 major countries and other small countries were naturally a sea of people, more than 10,000 in number, and every day they sent a large number of ninjas to search for information about the Akatsuki's base. What's the situation with the Nibi's Jinchuriki? Looking at the world in the rain, Dustless faintly asked. As for the so-called allied forces, he directly ignored them. After reviving the Jubi, a few Baijidama can easily deal with them. In front of the 10 tails, numbers would not change anything. That's right. Although they killed my doppelganger immediately, they did find traces of Yujito no Ni. White Setsu said in a deep voice. In order to find out about Second Last, hundreds of his clones were all killed by the Ninja Coalition army that secretly protected him. Yujito Ni is being watched by the 5 Kages in turn. Almost every day there are 2 Kages who won't let her go. Hearing this, Dustless only nodded slightly and his heart relaxed. After so many years, this little fish that had been hiding in the sea had finally jumped out. Does Obito know about this? Wu Qin turned his head and looked at Baiju. He suddenly asked. That brat knew about it before Lord Dustless did, and it seems that he has already taken action. Looking at Dustless's gaze, this time it was Black Setsu's turn to speak. His voice was always hoarse, but this time it was slightly different, with a hint of gloating. Both Obito and Dustless came for the Jubi, but there is only one real Jubi Jinchuriki. The two are bound to fight fiercely for the Jubi's power. Even if you know that this is a conspiracy, can you choose to resist? Black Setsu was extremely proud. This is the so-called open conspiracy. Even if Dustless knows that it is a conspiracy, he must participate in this competition for the Jubi's power. However, Dustless's performance disappointed Black Setsu, and even a sentence directly made him vomit blood. The truth is, let's see his unprecedented power. As a chakra, you don't know the strength of the Jubi, let Obito become the Jinchuriki for the time being. Looking up at the misty world, Dustless's eyes flashed with eagerness. He has been standing at the top of the pyramid for many years, and he has already experienced the feeling of loneliness at the top. Black Setsu's mouth twitched fiercely, and his heart was very depressed. He opened his mouth, but seeing Dustless's determined and calm face, he took back the words that were about to come out of his mouth. Damn it. Black Setsu's mind was running quickly. He hoped that Dustless and Obito would fight because of the Jubi, and it would be best if one of them died. Who would have thought that Dustless would be so open-minded and give up just like that? Peace won't last long. With a long sigh, Dustless faintly said to himself. The Ninja Allied Forces has been established, containing a large number of ninjas from almost the entire world. Now, the base of the Akatsuki has not been found, but it is also a matter of time. In a few days the Rain Village will be exposed. The large number of ninjas from the 5 major countries is not a joke, especially many small countries have already turned to them. At present only the Rain Village is wavering. I am afraid that it will not take long for the world to be completely exposed. But you actually think that I can't do it alone? It's really ridiculous. After so many years I have put a lot of effort. The corner of his mouth lifted into a cold arc, Dustless's eyes swept over Zetsu, and his heart was unusually calm. The Ghetto Mazo and several other tailed beasts are in the hands of Obito, but Dustless also has a lot of cards in his hand. He has even more advantages than Obito. Atsuro is the biggest card, and Hinata, who awakened the Tensigan a few days ago, and several of them. Dustless's whole body was calm, and his temperament was indifferent and calm. Obito was too far behind. Friends, vote quickly in the next world. If you don't vote, you can leave a message in the book review section. You're tuning in to the Sword Dance in the Vast Sky YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.